Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriads of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are proud and pleased once again to present our National Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam. This is important subject matter. This is important subject matter that we choose for tonight and also for this time. And in its nature, redundant, because truth doesn't come in versions. It is what it is. What you'll find is most people's concepts of both government and geopolitics is incorrect, right? What's being pressed on the people now, whether they want it to be or whether they don't want it to be. And we've said over the years, one of the things that men, and that's talking about the species, are going to be pressured in this time to do, to act upon, to display, is to prove their gods. Which means as man unfolds, his God unfolds. And everything that we have been professing in different areas around the planet concerning our special self-idea of importance and relationship is going to have to be proven. Meaning that it's sort of like when the sun's out, everybody can talk trash. We can have picnic, whether you're eating peanut butter sandwiches or bologna, hey, do your thing. Talk trash and everything. Wind start blowing, funnels start forming in the air, and storm, rain, and hail starts coming down. You can roll your blanket up if you want to, like you got sense, put them sandwiches in the car or whatever, or you can sit there and try to prove your point and talk about it ain't gonna rain on me because I got a special relationship with the Lord. Most likely you have a soggy sandwich. You might get blown away, and watch out for that tree that's falling and everything else. In the real world of economics and politics, that's what's happening all over the planet now. Knowing that most people aren't aware of, put it this way, the operations of the priesthood, who they don't suspect, that's really behind a lot of this mess, including artificial weather attacks, including psychic attacks that have been putting on people, including sound wave attacks with subtle humming that the people got used to and never even noticed that it goes on to interfere with the brain waves. We're not just talking about microwave technology, we're talking about actually sound wave technology too. Some of which is now being interfered with. We won't get into who's interfering with it and why. We're just saying it's being interfered with. So they can't continue to do a lot of things that they've been used to doing to humanity for quite some time. Now, humanity, for the most part, has been operating under feudal law operations for generations. And so conceptually, they don't know what constitutional law is. They've never lived under it. Are we clear? They've talked about it, but they've not lived under it. An example, and interject if you choose to. We want to interject. And any questions that come about it, we'll talk about it, because it needs to be talked about. So I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. The average person that's going about their business in their everyday jobs, long O, short O, we need to not get into that. their relative, has been operating with an idea that their grandmother and their mother and themselves own a house and have a deed to it, as an example. At the same time, not knowing that the deed is a sharecropping agreement with the popes of Rome under the Roman Curia, run from Fleet Street, England, and then regulated with the mercenary army called the U.S. Army and controlled from Washington, D.C. All of which has nothing to do, in fact, constitutionally with the people of the land or the organic land itself, but are in fact de facto governors over the land and the people. Are we clear? Distinguished from de jure. De jure means according to law and by right. You can go deeper, but this keeps it simple for the average person. De jure means according to law and by right. De facto means not according to law and not by right, yet it's operative. Are we clear? So people have been groomed and living under this, thinking that they were being protected under this, which we would call the Republic or Constitutional Law and Treaty. So the people's operative position is that the people who have been governing, who've been called government, have been operating de jure, when in fact they have been imposters for quite some time. They've been in fact imposters since 1861. And systematically, incrementally crushing the people's rights totally. By plan and by what is called, and you can write this down, corporate secession operations. And via the corporate secession operations, this is where planning information is transferred to the next generations or next holders of what you call political office and institutional office. Are we clear? To the masses, pardon me, these people are separate. This is where you hear the term all the time, separation of church and state. Understand that has always and only been for the masses, never for the ones who project it. Are we clear? For they know that this corporate state and the church are one, always have been. Never have been separate. It is the offspring of the church. All right? And of course, the church is not what people think it is, nor was. Now, as a point of interest for people who may want to get into that, and we won't get into that, let's talk about what church means. Church is from Germanic church, which means the great circle. That's what it means. So we notice the zodiac, but we also know that they don't teach it. So we need not go there. We're just giving definition of what the word church means. So we don't have to tell you that most people who go to these buildings have never been taken to church. They've been going to these buildings called church. Are we clear? That doesn't take anything from them, but it does expose the person standing at that pulpit who knew this and never told them, and is part of the system of robbing them for Rome under Roman tithe system, which is 10% tax for Rome, that they actually been working for Rome all the time. We need not get into that, but that's just simply the truth. So these things need to be known in order to begin to relieve the pressure on humanity, and to also get them in such a recognition of self that they're not pitted against each other in wars, which has been actually perpetrated by these very people who've been selling them gods in secret, who look good and holy and mighty, but in secret have been meeting with these other people called politicians, all of whom are priests who've actually been planning all of these wars all around the planet and pitting people against each other in the name of racism. That is a total fiction. That's the truth. So, in order to stop or to bring some peace on this planet, whether people choose to act on it or not, every man, woman, and child has a right to do what they want to do. However, they also have a right to know the truth about how things work, to make those choices rationally. Right? And so they must know the difference between de jure and de facto. If, and since it is an issue also concerning government, right? If you want to look at synonyms to get a concept with this, if you're talking about government, here you would talk republic, right? Here you would talk democracy. These are opposites. So the people have been told that the real government is a democracy, when actually the democracy is the body of organized imposters. So what occurs when the people keep teaching their children our democracy? They have sanctioned actually the imposters, which is why they're broke, why they've been suffering. Yes, why their communities have been gentrified, and also why they've been sent to all these wars, going to and fro the earth, devouring nations, in the name of gods and countries. And never suspect that these people are actually demons. And that's for real. And we're not talking about, the vampire in the movie type thing. We're talking about people in shirts and ties and looking quite legitimate. And they've been getting away with it because the people don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're dealing with. And because they don't, makes them easy victims. As an example, this is what they'll do. Like, you can be presented as a nation state, or even someone who has, say you have a piece of land over in New Jersey somewhere, that an oligarch that you think is your congressman or congresswoman wants to sell to someone in, as an example, Ukraine, who they have partnership with, right? They will take tax that they taxed you with, go hire a contractor who will hire a contractor who has stock in their secret corporation, vice versa, to go poison your wells. And will put an ID card that came from you near the well. And then all of a sudden someone will find that ID card and they'll blow it up in the newspaper. Then they'll come and raid your house, maybe kill some of your family members and you. And you're charged with poisoning his well. Now his well's no good, now they're going to come and rescue him. And they'll declare your land uninhabitable and get you off the land. And if you don't cooperate, they'll do other things to you. Then they'll sell the land to their partner in Ukraine. And then the Ukrainians will kick back to the oligarch who you think is your congressman. And that's how the network's always been working. They do it to nation states and they do it to ordinary people on the land. Like say you got a piece of land and say you got some cattle on it and you've been farming this land and you got deeds to it and you got an idea that your family owned this land for 90 years type thing. And they discover some oil on your land that you think is your land. They will literally send an army out there and murder you and take it. Literally. If they can't get it in another way. you will be declared a terrorist, anti-government, sovereign citizen, because you're starting to talk Constitution, and anything that talks about Constitution, and they literally will murder you and your children, and literally take it, and then sell it to some corporation that has a contract with the United States mercenary operations and the oligarchs that you think is your congressmen and your senators. It's not a scenario that's true. That is a scenario I'm telling you, but do you know that those things happen every day and the average person doesn't even know what they're looking at, except people who really understand government and what is not government? So go ahead.
Islam, in that same vein of what you're speaking of, I've heard of persons who have had not only land taken away or scounded with, but they actually are in cahoots with these the banks, we know, and the credit organizations, and they will ruin a person's credit all of a sudden. They will make loans come due that they can't possibly pay, because it was supposed to be, say, over a period of time, and now all of a sudden it's due in full by a certain date, and they'll destroy people who begin to expose. I heard of a couple that exposed some Benghazi stuff, and by the time they got back to here, they couldn't get any work. They lost their businesses because they just ran a gambit.
Now, can we interject right there, and don't lose your thought, because I want you to continue on that. Write this down. Confessed judgment. Confessed judgment. Now go back. Now go back to what you were talking about, and then I'm going to explain confessed judgment. Now, people at North Central America, that's called de facto United States, which is really a corporation registered in Austria, having nothing to do with the land, but it appears to, because that's the people's training. Are we clear? So that must be clear in your mind. And for those who doubted, the reason I say that, because it's researchable. And because whenever you tell the truth, understand when you say anything that relates to truth, you will be immediately attacked. So let's get past that. So let's not be surprised. Let's know that that's already operative. Are we clear? If you say anything that's what is known as constitutional, you will be attacked. All right, so let's not act surprised. Know that that's protocol. Are we clear? However, most of the masses are not aware that because of the fact around the world, different people in what you think is government and people who are out of government by necessity. Listen to what I'm saying to you. Not because they're moral, though a few maybe, I'm not arguing that, to save themselves are coming together to unravel what has been operating on this planet for a couple hundred years. Not being aware of that is dangerous to you, not because it itself is dangerous to you, it's because not knowing it puts you in harm's way, because you're in harm's way anyway. But when you don't know a storm is coming, you can't prepare for it. Do you understand? When the people that you're dealing with that you think is your government and you're operating sincerely, it makes you an easier victim, because they're going to accelerate their intended injury to you, because they know that at this time, unlike times before, they're being uncovered. So they're doing desperate things when the persons who are not aware are even less aware. They're just thinking these problems are some outside source of stuff going on. and are attributing these economic and political problems to something that has nothing to do with its origin. Are we clear? It is not unlike not knowing that your gardener is the one who's been killing your animals. The gardener that you've been paying to do your lawn. And he's also the one that killed your baby that you thought disappeared in the forest 2 years ago. And you got a contract with him. And all the time they've been always right there, pointing over there. And all the time you've been paying them. And you trusted them. Not only that, they were in partners with the water guy that you've also been paying. And he's also the one that took your taxes and bought the pit bull that bit your cousin, that they talked you into buying a new Secret Service protection agency for multi-million-dollar contracts that you've been paying for the last 10 years and keeps going up another million every other year. You never dawned on you that all these people that you've had, that you think are your public servants, have actually been the ones that's doing 90% of every injury that's ever happened to you. And that's the truth. That's not an exaggeration. That's what's been happening here at North America. Now, point and fact. This is point and fact. They have created different sociology terms. White people, black people, middle class, lower class, elite, blah, 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 type thing, right? Yes. So what they've done is they've made people think that they're secure in these different class systems and pit them against other people in other class systems. These are words that they made up, sociological classifications. What has happened is, after they use them, then they discard them. Are we clear? When the Unum Sanctum operations was totally secure, they were able to always use what they refer to as the middle class to actually deal with what you call the sociological engineering of the lower class, which means most of the economic problems in the communities were created. They weren't natural, never were. That includes the poverty, the miseducation, the corruption, the dirt, the diseases, and everything. 90% of them are not natural, created in a laboratory, in truth. That includes the sicknesses and the diseases, including cancer, which is weaponized. That's a fact. All right? Problem. Some of the people in what they call the middle class have finally figured out that they're being sacrificed. So they are starting to tell, because most of them in what you call upper middle class are Masons, Shriners, Eastern Stars, DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, some in your lower memberships of the Thule Society, Knights Templars, Knights of Columbus, etc. Many who were once beneficiaries of this whole fraud are now being sacrificed. It's sort of like how do you say, the phoenix bird eating its own tail type thing, the snake eating its own tail type thing. That can't go on. So they're telling. Now, so what you have is sort of like the person that hired you to poison his well to get his well. Now it's come the time where before things ran so well because they were robbing you to pay him. And then robbing this nation over here to fund all of this. And when one of those things in the chain is interrupted, it messes up the system. This is what is happening right now for what you call the United States government. And very often you will hear them saying, keep this in mind, write this down so you never forget this. When they're exposing a lot of this oligarchy stuff in the modern contemporary world, they will tell you The industrial military complex is the problem, right? And they'll say that Dwight D. Eisenhower, the German Dutchman, exposed it, right? In 1954, 55, right? They lied. He didn't say that. He said the congressional industrial military complex. And they took out that first word, congressional. Why did he say it? Because that's what it is and that's what it was. And that's what it is right to this day. If you forget the congressional military industrial complex, just like that, you never suspect that the congressmen and congresswomen are multimillionaires because they're really lobbyists for the United States Corporation Company of Wall Street. So you're looking at people with a box cutter in some cave in Afghanistan, Gaddafi, Castro, somebody in Iran and Iraq that had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And they'll sacrifice them, but they can't do it so much now. They're going to sacrifice the people here. And most of the people aren't aware that that's what's in the cards. The reason they're going to sacrifice them because they know that you are most able to get back at them. That's why they want the guns of the middle class. That's why they want those guns. I'm just telling you, that's the reality of politics. What people do with it, that's on them. But you're being told the truth. On examination, don't accept what I'm saying, do the research. That's what's going on. However, for the few of the humans that have any integrity or honor left, so they can start doing whatever they need to do to start saving their families, they better keep this in mind because they need to know who they're talking to and who they're not talking to. And who they're paying taxes to and who they're not paying taxes to. And what they're funding and what they're not funding themselves against themselves. Because the people they thought were their friends are really their enemy. And that's the truth. The other deal is that every time they do something to the people, they always blame somebody else that had nothing to do with it. It's called projection. Write that down, keep that in mind. It's called projection. That is an organized practice, a conscious practice. Are we clear? A taught practice. Are we clear? All politicians at North America are trained in projection. That's why all of them belong to secret societies. Meaning that most of what they tell the public, no, they don't believe it, and they never did. They're just trained, what you call, to give what is called a public narrative. And anything that they say positive, guaranteed, they never fulfill it. Never, and never intended to. So get over yourself. And don't get disappointed. Because you should have figured this out generations ago, but nevertheless, it's what it is. Meaning that this is the face they wear, the mask. This is who they are. Are we clear? That's what you're dealing with. And the body of law that goes with them. Constitutional law and feudal law. They're opposites. You can also call it this. And this is so within the context of our conversation that when certain words are said that you'll understand or comprehend where we're going with the conversation, because we don't have the time to do an etymology on every word. But you need to know the context in which we're speaking. Because as we expose this information, there will be others who will be paid to counter us and say that we're saying something that we're not saying. To the negative. Do you understand? Go ahead.
Fascism related toward feudalism and feudal, is that the same?
Fascism is also not what people have been told. Fascism is literally and simply, which is what's going on here, true, yes. This is where the corporations that are operating on the land are secretly running the government. Are we clear? But the persons who are claiming to be government are pretending that they're separate from the corporations. And sometimes not, but that's what a fascist is. Okay. So fascism is where the corporations that are supposed to be kept in check by government are actually running the government, and they're actually in partnership to the injury, both by fact and both by intention of the people. And that the people are made servants to them as opposed to being served by them. And all laws are groomed to serve that end. It's not opinion, that's what fascism is. I'm trying to keep it simple. All right? And do the research. They'll tell you similar to what I just said, but not bluntly like I said it, because that's what it is. And that's actually what's been taking place since 1861 when they got rid of Lincoln. That's the real reason they got rid of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the last lawful de jure president for the United States. After Abraham Lincoln, every president operating at North America was and is a Democrat feudalist, even if they say they're part of the Republican Party.
That's right.
Republican Party does not support the Republican. Are we clear? And their politics is to deceive you while raping you generation to generation, as well as dumbing you down. The problem that we have now is that they have taken so much blood from the people that the people are getting ready to collapse. The people are used to programs and being programmed and are pretty sure, vainly, that the so-called politicians are going to come to their aid and save them. When the real deal, they're setting up for themselves and their own future while preparing to sacrifice the people, because they know if you wake up, you might come at them with pitchforks. Again, that's why I'm telling you why they're doing all these things, wanting your guns. It's not defense. Guns aren't violent. Violent people may use a gun. You know, like bolts. Don't do this. Ooh, that was a good one. Let's ban bolts. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they say that about guns, and people who don't think actually fall for it, not knowing that their intention is to disarm the people because they know that you're going to find out what they really did to you. They know that the masses of people in the poor communities have no defense whatsoever, so they just kill them at will. Like, say, for instance, you could be selling potato chips on the corner of the street, and they'll come and literally choke you to death right on the street and say that you were violent, and no one goes to jail. But they can't exactly do that in some other communities who happen to have their rods and their staffs, and they comfort someone. So they need to get them rods and them staffs from them, because truthfully, that's where it's going. Now, that's the truth. The masses, for the most part, smell it but don't see it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? But those who really know the real history that's been going on at North America know that it's coming. Now, deal of it is, the priesthood, who are calling themselves politicians, also know it's coming. This is where you see all this wildness going on between the Democratic Party trying to get Trump out of office. That's what that really is about. I'm telling you what it's about. They can tell you anything they want to tell you. Telling you what it's about. It's really an undeclared, not public, it's really a civil war that they're trying to operate with the appearance of civility. Do you understand? But don't be surprised if, which they do, because they've always practiced what they call false flags and red flag type stuff. They've always done that. To distract as well as to justify doing things to the people. Meaning that they will come, they'll hire somebody with your tax money to go shoot your dog and then already have a so-called law in place to come take your guns to save your dog that was already killed by some lone gunman who didn't get a peanut butter sandwich at McDonald's and shot your dog. So they want to take your guns because the criminal's gun shot your dog. The real deal is because they know the way things are going on the planet now, that you're going to find out that all of these negative things that's been happening to you, they were the ones that did it and paid for it by contractors with your tax money against you. And you called him and her your congressman. Not knowing that secretly they were oligarchs since they murdered Lincoln. Now, like any other false platform or false position, in time, anything that's fraudulent begins to eat itself. This is really what's happening. And so people who are aware of this have a different outtake on life and what they do, what they choose to do, how they choose things that they say, where they put their energy and service in. And logically, it appears to the masses who don't know this that these people are out of step or out to lunch, which is kind of understandable given the fact that they have thick, bifocal, super dark shades on. They can't see in the day, less more than night. And so knowing that that's the state of affairs, the perpetrators of these frauds push these people against each other to divide them. They get you arguing with each other about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and who you're going to vote for, when the votes never counted anyway. And everybody that was put in any office at North America was already assigned before they got in office. All of those voting games is to spend the people's finances and to make them think they're important. And every one of those persons that you think that you're elected is already in cahoots to attack you with some contractor that they hire to rape you some more. Whether it's pharmaceuticals, that they'll call health care, which is really death care. Whether it's military operations, defense, because the ones who are attacking you are them. They just do it through contractors, so it doesn't look like it's them. Then the finance loops right back to them. Are we clear? And of course, keep you busy. They argue with each other, dog and pony shows, so you think that we're going to give you a better sandwich than the other guy did. And they do it every 2 and 4 years. And it's worked. The deal of it is that's not exactly working anymore. And they see that this is coming to an end for real for them, even though many of the masses are still asleep. There's enough who are awake that are not going to tolerate this anymore. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And they know it's only a matter of time when a reasonable number of the common people wake up and going to come after their necks.
Yeah.
Starting with the people who claim to be God men on every other corner, who they didn't know, but now we're going to find out have actually been agents of the state. And have actually been keeping them abreast of what's going on in the individual local communities, while the people think they're playing to Jesus, God, and Allah type stuff. Now that's the ugly truth. And provable. However, most people will disagree in their opinions with what I just said, and I understand that. Although the record and the evidence will prove that to be true. They just don't want to admit their own hypocrisy, to have been supporting this farce themselves all the time anyway. However, because these people are willing to sacrifice them, is why I'm doing this subject matter. Because people don't know that these people who they trusted are already processing to sacrifice them. Even to the degree of doing what they like to call serious false flags, no different than they did when they took them buildings down in New York when Germany came for their gold, and they were stealing the gold. And one of their trucks were actually in the tunnel when the building fell. And that's why they got rid of all of the debris real quick and then put yellow tape around it and did an examination of that scene. Why? Because they did it. And everybody in the world knows it, but the people here. Do you understand? Now, and keep this in mind, this is very important. This is very important to recognize from a political perspective. And interject if you please too. Understand that Germany is the United States corporation #1 ally. France second, but Germany first, right? Now, when Germany, the representatives of Germany sent ambassadors to New York City to check their gold holdings in the vaults, because there's a tunnel that goes from those twin towers that was in New York to the Federal Reserve underground, and always did, that the masses don't know about. And that they were stealing gold from other nation states that they were holding in New York. They were doing it all the time, selling it and leasing it to keep their corporate shell going. Germany sent a couple of ambassadors to check on their gold, which were all numbered. Do you understand this? All numbered. They told them to go take a walk, to go take a hike. Now keep in mind, Germany's their #1 ally. Then a few days later, those buildings came down and they accused a man that they called bin Laden of doing it from a cave in Afghanistan with a box cover and a computer. And the people bought it. The people knew they were lying and they knew they were lying, but yet the people took that narrative and blew it up and it became the documented history. That's the kind of stuff they are willing to do to the middle class, to preserve their position. Now, when the middle class finds that out, not that they didn't really know it, they kind of really in their heart knew it. They were just in denial. But they didn't think that, that these people would start stealing their accounts. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Everybody's catching it, but they didn't think that they really do that to them. Right? Well, they were, and they are. So now many people in the upper middle class are speaking out, and they're looked at like they're out to lunch. The ones that they don't kill. Because they will kill them. No, let's not get this out of your... Let's not get this naive unreality that people have been protecting.
Okay.
They have a lot of body counts that you don't see in the newspapers. Every last one of those president people that you think is your president got a whole list of bodies that they laid out that knew the real politics that either were going to tell or were tapped to tell or in some way threaten them to expose the system. Because they have no intentions of the people coming literally down Washington, D.C. or in your local governments and hanging these people literally from the nearest light pole. So they'll kill the people before you do it. That's what their intentions are. That's why it's subject matter. Are we clear? So if you start talking about the Republic, they will say that you're anti-government. They'll plot on killing you and then saying you're the killer because you told them that the system's corrupt. You're going to get her killed for talking constitutional stuff. You're dangerous. And then people start looking at you for telling the truth, as if you're the one that took those buildings down in New York. You're the ones that threw the tea over at Boston into the water. You're the ones that poisoned the water out there in Oklahoma and blew the building up, type stuff. And now you're the one that are messing with the derivatives in Deutsche Bank, which is getting ready to hit the public in a few. Because all of their mortgages and stuff that the Jesuits' army through the CIA have been set up Deutsche Bank for in the first place. So all of the mortgages of all of your major banks, the called loans type thing that you're just talking about, were bundled and put in Deutsche Bank to hide from the people's eyes and ears. So when they look at Deutsche Bank, they're thinking, oh, that's Germany. What's that got to do with the U.S.? Because in their mind, the U.S. is a country. Are we clear? That's only in their mind. It's a delusion. Are we clear? So the U.S. is really a mercenary army for the Pope. Always has been. And they've dumped all their derivatives of these people here who've been claiming to be Americans and paying all these taxes. And their deeds and mortgages are bundled in there in Deutsche Bank in Germany. So I suggest you pay attention to Deutsche Bank closely. And every time something even shakes a little bit, don't think Germany, think North America. That's just an insight. I won't go into that, I'll just tell you that much. But because it's rattling heavy, even though the masses don't hear it, I'm just dropping that at you. You can do what you want to do with it. But what you're not going to do is deny what I just now said, because it's in the works already. It's sort of like you can tell people years ahead on some things, and they forget that you've told them years ago. So I'm telling you Deutsche Bank because that will happen soon, where you can't deny it. Oh, go ahead.
Islam, I try to get some of my news from other places, alternatives than what we would generally be, in tune. We'll tune into certain stations, but I listen to a lot of talk radio. And I believe I was either listening, I listened to Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, mostly daily, for a period of time, and last week they talked about Deutsche Bank and what's going on with that and what's getting ready to, just exactly what you're saying. You're not going to hear that in the mainstream media because they want us to think that everything is all hunky-dory, rosy, everything's going well. But there are some that are actually speaking out and talking about not only are they talking about what's happening with Deutsche Bank now, but they're bringing back up what happened in 2008, in the bailout.
Because they're all related.
Right. So that's coming back up. And they're saying this time it's going to be worse.
Now, we were telling, when George Bush was in office, when I was teaching mostly on a regular basis at the cathedral room in Harlem, at the National Theater on 5th and 125th, we were telling the people then to watch Deutsche Bank. Now this is when, like Bush gave that finance to the banks, and we were telling people, that they're really one network, and people were saying, no, he's not. I said, yes, he will. Don't worry about it. He will. And they're going to nationalize Chrysler, and they're going to nationalize General Motors. So basically what they did was take the people's tax finance and actually fund the bankers with their bare loans that they piled in Deutsche Bank to cover it up. That's what that was all about. And they'll talk about saving the auto industry to save jobs. No, they get it, and so shortly after that, you see Detroit die. I went to as an example, I went to Detroit. I had to do a lecture at Considine Hall, and that was the last time I flew because I already knew about the Wegener's disease, etc. But I flew to Detroit, and instead of staying at the Westin where they had prepared a suite for me, which they usually do when I go out of state, I stayed actually at the people's house, some of who were having me come out there. One, because it was about a mile and a half from Considine Hall, and two, because they were besetting on me and conversations, etc. And they wanted me to come to look at the hall and say where I wanted the cameras, where we wanted the boards. They had bleachers and chairs, so it was actually, over 1,000 people there, actually, somewhere in that area. And so they wanted me to say where I wanted all the equipment and how I wanted things set up. So they were going to take me there Saturday morning after I flew in, and one of the estates, like it looked like an estate house, on the corner, when we turned the corner, the grass was so well groomed it looked like astroturf. That's how well groomed it was, right? And had black wrought iron rolling fence on the side, had the double gates in the front, double doors, well stained, heavy, thick wood doors. There was, as I recall, a black Cadillac, spotless in the driveway. But it had space for other cars too. And many of those houses, well kept. Anyway, when we got up in the morning, we went to Captain somewhere where they have seafood. I wanted some seafood. And I didn't want them to, cook and go through a whole bunch of stuff. So we went to this place and I got seafood. We came back on the computer, and I was talking to them before I, went to rest, getting ready for the morning. So in the morning they were taking me, they sent a limo to pick me up to go to Considine Hall. So in the morning, I'm going out, and we go around the corner. That same house, the gates were off. Car was going, the hose was off the side, the front doors were out, and a couple of windows were out. On the way to Considine Hall, one of the things they wanted to do, while I was there, truthfully, because I actually stayed out there for about a week and a half. And one of the contractors that have been doing windows where I stayed, in the front where the house, it had two ridge peaks. The house, the way it was designed in the front, brick and offset. And water had rotted the sill. And so the contractors were doing the sills, doing some of the brickwork, and replacing the windows. Anyway, the contractors had let them hanging, and the windows were in the front room, like for a couple months. And so the sister asked me, would I stay long enough to do the windows? Because they know I'm a house doctor. And I looked at it and it was all rotted and stuff, so I just had to fix it. So I just stayed there and I cast the windows put new sills in, put the windows in. And they took me around to Detroit. They said, you know you could make a fortune here? Type thing, you know. You already know I'm not interested in that. I've been there, done that. That's not where I'm at right now. And we drove literally for miles straight. Beautiful structured houses that you couldn't get here in this area for $400,000 and $500,000. 5,000. I'm going to repeat. Houses, something like, if you go up down here and you go in certain areas and you see these houses that single homes with nice lawns, that you're not touching them for less than 4 and 5, 5 and 10,000. Ordinary row houses that were really nice, 1,000 notes, begging you to get. People would go to work, come home, their stuff is gone. You could ride miles and miles and miles, and you literally see. You know that movie that Will Smith did? Legend. And you seen the neighborhood? In fact, that's Detroit. For real. But that's the point that I'm making. Now, back to the point on confessed judgment, when you brought that issue up about the mortgage. Say if you went and got a mortgage for a house, right? In the instruments that they have you signing, they'll sit there while you're signing these papers. In it is a confessed judgment. You already gave the house up when you signed the mortgage. And when they foreclose, and they can do it when they want to, they call what is called the loan. Then you're starting to argue on the foreclosure, even if you so-called made what you think is payments. And they won't take it, they'll still take the house. It's called confessed judgment. That's why I told you to write that down, because I want you to remember that when you go into the auction block in the Chancery Court, and they're talking about foreclosure, that's really what's taking place. Because you didn't own it, and they never sold it to you. And you were listed as a tenant in a sharecropping agreement. And they assigned themselves as your FOFR, as trustee, and within 72 hours they sold it to another corporate operation who assigned themselves as your trustees. And at any time, they could have foreclosed it because it was already foreclosed. How can you go through a closure, and then have a foreclosure? So we need not go there. So I'm telling you again why for years we've always been telling people to set up a trust. Because they don't know that they're dealing with a de facto operation. They're thinking they're dealing with a de jure operation. Are we clear? So that goes back to the issue of Franklin Delano Roosevelt funding the next United States corporation, Shell, that they created after the one that Wilson set up, after the one that they crashed since was in operation since Lincoln's assassination, which were 3 different United States corporation shells. Sound alike, they're different shells. Are we clear? That's the birth certificate issue that everybody keeps running after. Go ahead, Dr. Nail.
Islam, when you say shells, because I know you've been talking about corporate shells a long time, and I know what happens, say, if a corporation, I think in terms of when a corporation fails and they go and they set up another corporation. I mean, the same people are running
it.
Yeah, same people are running it, but it might have some difference in the name of it. But
that's where you see when the Pope wrote that letter to Obama,
and it was different ways.
And the different spellings?
Yes.
That's what it is.
So they kept changing, the nuance was slight changes in the spelling.
Because they were in fact different corporate shells.
So the one that they set up that is incorporated here in the state of Delaware as a religious nonprofit in 1989, I believe.
There you go.
Yeah, they set the United States.
There you go.
Right, 1989. they incorporated in the
their
state of
own
Delaware.
documents, but the average person can read it, and for whatever rationale, it never dawns on them what they're reading. It's not that it's not there to see. Not unlike the instrument that we shared with people years ago with the United States Corporation when they re-registered it again in 1925. You know, and this is just before Roosevelt pledged the birth certificates, bodily instruments, to fund the shell that dumped. Now, and you, as you already know, this is not new, nor subject matter that we've never covered. It's just that for some reason people, whether they're shell-shocked or whatever, they hear things, they collect data, and really don't pay attention to what that you've already told them. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And you could tell by conversations that people have as the doo-doo hits the fan, they're kind of blindsided by these things and go into a state of alarm, which means that they didn't get it. Do you get where I'm coming from? But yet, they said they got it. And it becomes apparent that they didn't. Now, sometimes they don't think it's important, but when you understand what's really going on, you're looking at it different. You're seeing a storm. They're looking at differences of opinion, different school of thought. Their concepts are on that surface. They're not seeing the real danger. They're analyzing the data of how you look at it, not knowing that you're in danger. Do you understand where I'm coming from with that? So you try to find different angles of telling them the same thing when you recognize they don't get it. But they say they got it.
Right.
But their conversations and the problems that they encounter and not having a concept of how to handle it indicates they have the data. They don't get it. And so you'll see people get caught into processes, whether it's UCCs, financial statements, different things like that. The HMO operations, authenticating the birth certificate, all of these things which are related to the Global Estate Trust or Global World Trust. But if you remove that as a subject matter, which is a tributary and a subordinate issue related to the larger body of operations, if you ask them, don't talk about the straw man, don't talk about authenticating the birth certificate, tell me about the Global Estate Trust. And most of them go silent. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Which means they don't really know what they're dealing with, because the persons who sold them the processes are not telling them all of the history. And so when they try to save their estates, they're blindsided again and they can't defend their position. And rather than these persons who they think is their government giving them remedy, they're actually attacking them. And they get confused, which means they didn't know that these people were de facto. What do you mean you didn't know? Yeah, I knew what the birth certificate is, it's a bodily instrument, and I know the difference between a loyal title and a mortgage in deed. But when you study, when you look at the problems that they're running into, and the things that are surfaced around them with their interchanges with local so-called government people, you can see they did not understand what they're dealing with at all. They just collected data. And so we're trying to get people to really think for real and start getting, they themselves must be their remedy. And they're looking for people who have information in these areas to be their remedy. It's not going to happen. Every man and woman and child must confess their own. Someone can assist you, but you must confess your own. But you need to know what your own is. Now this is back to the estate issue. All right? So the confessed judgment is already introduced when they have you signing those mortgages, which means you've already abandoned the estate. This is why they list people in mortgages and deeds as tenants, because they absolutely are. Under feudal law, are we clear? And so as a reminder, without going into it, this is why it's important it's not that you don't consider what Wilson did with the Chancery, the members of the Chancery and the church at Jekyll Island. They'll just talk about the bankers. It's the members of the Chancery and the Circle Church on Fleet Street, England, that met with Woodrow Wilson. Are we clear? And the bankers, which were actually board members for the Jesuits under the Pope, who owns the United States Corporation Company. Get this through your heads. If the Pope comes anywhere in any what they call Western countries, the people have to pay for his security. Pay for the parades, pay for the security, pay for the flights, pay for the food, clothing, and everything else. And the president, whoever he or she may be, is second step. Are we clear? To the masses who don't understand the politics, they're saying they're showing more importance to the Pope than our president. That president is his employee.
That's right.
Get over it. If you don't understand this, you can't understand the politics. Go ahead, Dr. Naomi.
Islam, and to give another show of who he was and what was going on, he rode around in a Fiat.
Yes.
So he rode around in a Fiat, so that was another way of speaking to,
Because
state
it
the
is
currency.
fiat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And that's also why, when they stole the people's finances to bail General Motors and Chrysler, that's why Fiat took over. You need to really know the relationship to everything. It's not circumstantial. One who understands how things really work, that none of this surprises you. You could be disappointed. Oh man, but you already knew it was coming. You're not blindsided. But the average person is. And again, like you'll see people, say operatives, right, among our own. The Romans refer to them as conversos. When seeing, like, say if we're operative on the estate issue, and we're causing the local politicians problems by nationalizing people and making estate claims, they will pick the weak one among you to come in and to divide your activity and get you fighting each other in order to buy more time. The argument may appear legitimate, and it may be legitimate. Most of it's petty. Due process takes no action whatsoever, which means they'll slander you, no due process, no fair hearing. They'll put you up on Facebook website and say that you wore green sneaks to the prom with pig lipstick and stuff like that, really. And say that you shouldn't be allowed to come here anymore. And figuring the people who don't understand constitutional principle, because they've been trained on the feudal law, will all jump on the bandwagon, half of them carrying ropes to hang you. No one ever approached you, ever gave you fair hearing or anything. They just slandered you. And half these people will jump on the bandwagon helping them to do it. Then after they do it, you just broke the unity that you had, which was strength that was building, which is really what the attack was all about. And most of the time, we fall for it. Right? Then they come little by little and come at you individuals and knock you out of the way. And it's worked perfectly. Problem that they're having is not working with the rest of the world anymore. Are we clear? Because the rest of the world was already aware of this, but the people here are slow. Or in part. Well, it's true. Slower in part. Now, so the deal of it is, because many of them are your family members, what happens to them also happens to you. And you will be concerned logically, but you're faced with the unfortunate condition of this. If your right arm offends you, cut it off. It's hard to do. But if you're going to survive, you're going to have to recognize you're going to have to do that. This is why you can't afford to get too personally attached, because of what's really actually going on. Go ahead.
This is an online question.
Go ahead.
From Rock Williams. It says, if we know that information is in the contract, can a person ask for that language to be removed before signing?
It's called amendment and by affidavit. What I think from hearing the question, there's an assumption of what you call fixed form contract.
Right, it's a contract of each.
They're talking fixed form contract? Yeah, well, we were talking earlier, right? And this is back to one, and this is redundancy, but knowing what a contract is in the first place, knowing what constitutes a contract, two or more competent beings. You can't be a minor or minority. You must be of legal, lawful, and competent age. The contract must show substance for substance to the fundamental rule of trade. It cannot be vague, and it cannot be linear. Linear means a contract where one person signs it and the other doesn't, but yet the other is holding the one who signs it to the contract. In law, it's not a contract. So first you must know what a contract is to argue it. It is no different than this in law. And this is back to the point. To the masses, this is money. Right? To the fact, it is not. This, by law, is known as private commercial paper, classified under fiat. A lot of people will say, this is fiat. That's kind of an incorrect statement.
That's right.
No, this comes under the classification of fiat. It is private commercial paper, classified under fiat. This silver coin, this copper, and what I don't carry all the time is also a gold coin, is the money.
Me the money.
Are we clear?
Right.
Clear.
This is de jure.
All right.
This is de facto. When it comes to lawful argument, you better be clear on this, distinguished from this. Likewise, to really make claim on this that's hidden behind this, you better be the heir. The problem with this is that the heir has been declared a slave under fraud. And under unum sanctum operations and what is known as the doctrine of discovery, aliens have been claiming the estate of the Americans. And they built an entire political system around it called the United States of America Trading Company. And they take those last two words off of it and have been calling it a country since 1861. And that concept has been ingrained in the minds of the people. And all of the instruments that they have been producing since then, they incrementally and systematically, so that the people would not rebel, was stealing this. And the last major move they made on stealing this was 1964. So 1964, the last of these were minted at North America. Their minds and their intent is that their missionary work was complete, that HORAM of Biff was buried, was dead. In Masonry, they'll call it burial of HORAM of Biff. They struck him in the head, Jubilah, Jubilo, Jubilum. England, Ireland, and France under the Spanish Inquisition, and have taken over Morocco, and now are the keepers of the North Gate. And they told the people that this was the money. Then in around 1878, they took our Great Seal off the new. In 1928, they put the seal back on. This is after their corporation Shell crashed again, and they call it the Great Depression. That actually took place before, the 30s. They'll admit to the 30s it started crashing around 24. This is why in 1925 they set up a new United States corporation, Shell, which I shared the papers with you, and we've been sharing with the people for the last couple of decades, so they can get it clear in their minds, because it's hard for people to accept. Not that the information is not available. It's difficult for people to accept that the United States is not a country. It's a private corporation, a conglomeration of Roman oligarchs who've been operating around the world, and particularly in America, as the United States of America Corporation, with a military arm, which are mercenaries, called the U.S. Industrial Complex, led by the Congress. And so Eisenhower referred to them as the Congressional Industrial Military Complex. In history, they'll write off the Congress word that Eisenhower said, and they'll just say, Eisenhower warned the people of the military industrial complex, when that's not what he said. He said the Congressional Military Industrial Complex. Because he knows, and all of them know, that the Congress and the senators operating at North America are really secret oligarchs, and they're really trustees for the United States Corporation. They answer to London. And the judicial system operating at North America and Canada, which are really called court systems, are really auction blocks to effectuate the Spanish Inquisition under the doctrine of discovery. This is why the Pope of Rome did the motu proprio in 2013 and told them to cease and desist the operations, and promised and had government leaders and so-called religious leaders, the priesthood, from around the world in all walks of religions, club members, kiss the ring type thing, say we're stopping the doctrine of discovery, we're not going to do this anymore. And then of course, that's 2013. And then of course they breached it, and then he followed it up with that letter to Barack Obama called Civil Orders, which is actually a letter or command edict on top of the motu proprio of the Shell of 2013. And they promised not to set up another corporate shell. So we're talking about the shells. So when I'm talking about the shells, we're talking about corporations which are the dead. Because remember, the people have been trained to speak of the corporations as the living. This is where the personage argument comes in with the Freedmen's Bureau closing in 1868 and the re-emphasis of the United States being designated as person. Why? So that they couldn't convert the people's estates. So this is why when you listen to the average person who does not understand this, they'll say things like, the city of Delaware sent me a letter today. He's speaking of Delaware City Corporation as a person. It's dead. It did nothing. It says nothing. It testifies to nothing.
There you go.
Are we clear? But the people are trained to give it personage, not knowing that when they speak that, they just transferred their birthright to the corporate owners.
They give up jurisdiction.
Exactly, which is why they do not teach civics or jurisdiction. You will never, 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 never hear any persons that's talking about the nation of this and the nation of that and the nation of this and the nation of that ever teach in personam jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, and territorial jurisdiction. Never. They'll talk nation of this and nation of that and never teach nationality. As a matter of fact, they'll talk against nationality while talking about nations.
That's right.
No,
That's right.
it's true. And then they'll talk about courts and systems and never talk about diversity. And never talk about Article 3 nor Article 3, Section 2. But they'll talk about court systems. And then they'll talk about people being abused and losing in these venues that they think are courts. And then start funding marching and praying organizations to deal with the symptoms of the problems that they keep encountering that are never going to be resolved because the whole platform is a fraud. And then you can show them that's a fraud and they'll call you out to lunch, you're a troublemaker. You're going to get these people killed talking about Constitution. But yet all these people take an oath on that Constitution.
Right.
And they operate under de facto feudal law. So the conflicts, some of the conflicts that you see, is actually the people who have been pretending to be working on behalf of the people have always actually been feudalists. So they will attack you if you talk Constitution, while pretending that they are the constitutionalists. That is the politics that you see going on right now, whether you see Donald Trump and versus the Republican and Democratic Party. I didn't say Donald Trump versus the Democrats. Donald Trump versus the Republican and Democratic Party, both of which want him out of office, while pretending that they're working for the people. They've never done anything for the people and don't intend to do anything for the people. They are private oligarchs and multimillionaires because they've been robbing the people. And Donald Trump, with his activities, is threatening that platform. And that's not a defense of Donald Trump, it's just talking the truth of the politics. Now, one of the motivations of Donald Trump, and again, I have to repeat because people keep twisting what you say.
All right.
Because I'm not defending him.
That's
just
right.
telling the truth of the politics.
He's not.
Is Donald Trump knows that if he doesn't fix this thing, it's over for everybody. Do you understand?
Yeah.
That's not also to imply that he's savior either.
Okay.
Do you understand? Because the nations of the earth have already determined that they're no longer going to fund the United States Corporation Army of the Jesuits, which means they're not going to buy any more U.S. corporation debt known as U.S. Treasury bonds, which means they're dead. Anybody that has them are dead. Are we clear? So which means all these beautiful malls are going to close up. All these big buildings that you see going on all over the place,
Yeah.
you're going to see the cranes going up and down, going up and down, going up and down, then go. All these cranes all over the place with these unfinished buildings. But a lot of this stuff is going on because they're trying to keep it looking like it's busy. Center City, Philadelphia, as an example. At any given time, you can ride around and count 13, 14 cranes. Right? Yet in Center City, if you were going in some of those buildings, 80% of those floors are empty above the first floor of the existing office buildings. So what's all this new office space for? I'm just telling you the truth. Now, what do you really understand about reality? They're building all of these cars and parking half of them in the desert. How long do you think that can go on? Not that it hasn't been going on, because it's been going on. Are we clear?
Yeah.
So now GM being, as an example again, largest employee other than the United States Corporation operations of the Jesuits.
General Motors.
Yes. And 54,000 went on strike, trying to get back what they were robbed from under Bush concessions in 2008. And as soon as they went on strike, General Motors closed 6 plants permanently. And one of the largest ones of GM in Ohio, they're not opening back up. So you can look for in the next few months some not minor changes, some radical changes in the entire auto industry. Because you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
That's just like the commercials you see. Don't pay more than a dime.
Yeah. It's a crime to pay money.
For a down payment.
And the deal of it is, in short order, they're not going to be able to give them away.
Shit, not even a dime.
In truth. Now, we can get into that, but we're not going to get into that right now. I'm just telling you, because you got to look at what's the tributary businesses, the restaurants, right? The secondary manufacturers, some make gearing for transmissions. Recently, because they already know what's down the pike. You know, we're not talking about what the public knows. I'm just talking about what's really going on. General Motors and Ford teamed up to make a common transmission for both of them. Because they already know what's coming, right? So really, transmission in the GM, transmission in the Ford, same thing. Do you understand? Now, right now they hit GM, and you know what they always do, they hit GM, then they come to Chrysler and Ford. What do you think is going to happen? Why do you think already that Ford and Chrysler and GM have been closing out sedan production for the last few years? They already know what's coming. The dummies don't. And the other corporations, they like to call themselves Wall Street and stuff, have been buying back their stock so that they could get a bigger dividend. Problem is, it froze up the credit market. So when they burn that cash out, guess what's happening? The bankers can't give any loans. This is what the 75 to 80 billion dollars a day that's been pumped into the bank systems was really all about. They themselves are killing this.
Just cream paper.
So now what are they going to do with these middle class people that have been used to living quite comfortably? Most of them happen to have rods and staffs to comfort you. The poor people don't have rods and staffs. This is why they're doing all these false flags. Like say with people going to some country music outing where you see thousands of people having fun, families and everything, children, mothers, motorhomes and everything, comfortable in America type thing. And all of a sudden, this crazy guy that was eating snail sandwiches earlier in the day launched out and started shooting from the 34th floor of a hotel building that has the windows don't open up.
But he killed 50.
With more accuracy than you do on a firing range. With people being injured straight on, not on a downward level, and the people buy that.
And from different directions.
The people over here called de facto government, guided by, secretly, these people who they think are their congressmen or senators, have done this to them. That's the real truth. Have been doing it to them and will continue to do it until they're stopped. Now that's the truth. Go ahead. Give her the mic. You got to raise your mic.
Real quickly. So the fact that the casino made the deal or the paid out all of these millions and millions to the family speaks to their complicitness with the de facto government. When you say,
consider this, to that multi-million, right? Why would they take that hit?
They have to be connected.
All right. Let's look at it two ways. Number one, this to them is not what it is to the masses. Example. You know, like when we're doing class and we say, oh, Tamara, copy some of this, copy this, and make sure everyone has this. You know, sometimes we do that when we have subject matter. Right? To Roman, write this down, Roman Curia membership. Roman Curia membership. And remember this, because I'm giving you a canvas to remember. It's not that we haven't talked about these things before, but I'm giving you a canvas to look at the politics currently. All corporate heads and board members of all trusteeships of all corporate entities under the United States Corporation Subdivision of England and Canada operations are members of the Roman Curia. Meaning, name any corporation operating on the land at North America and Canada and know that whoever the CEO is a member of the Roman Curia. We're not talking about what they admit, we're talking about what is. Are we clear? Right. So you can name any of them, Sears, Kmart, whatever you want to do, whatever bank, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Chase Manhattan, they're all members of the Roman Curia. To make it more simple for you to comprehend what's really going on, to the average mind of the average person, right? And it only got out because Trump happens to be in office. If Trump was in the office, it wouldn't be made public. And this has to do with people around him. So the masses are getting a little bit of it, though it's really more than what they're telling you. They're pumping 75 billion Federal Reserve notes into the banking system at North America every day. They've been doing it for the last few months. And admittedly, to the public, they have done it until up to the day before yesterday that they admit to. All right? Consider this. 75 billion a day for months. Now,
It's a lot of trees.
I'm going to remind you so you can get your head clear. Don't be impressed by that. Are we clear? We used to go around when I used to get off the station, we used to get the EPO newspaper.
EPA, yeah, I get it.
EPO, it's called EPO, really.
EPA Times, yeah.
You look like EPOC, it's EPO.
EPA Times.
They're not around there anymore. Now you got to order them. However, how many people know the old trick of Windex and newspaper makes one of the best mirror cleaners?
Yeah, yeah.
And how about all over the place, you see yesterday's newspapers given away? Well, this is the same thing to all members of the Roman Curia. Its value is only to the masses who don't understand what it really is. The game is to give you the impression that it has value to me. So, I'll roll one up with a 100 on it type thing, and take the lighter, light it, and then light a cigar with it. Wow, you know he's rich because he's lighting a cigar with $100 bill and shit. Well, that's your impression. He knows this is no different than the toilet paper that you use every day. Why? Because different ones in different areas, as an example, some buildings over there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Took a minute to finish them.
It's taking a
while. But that already told me when I talked about it before that that person who started it may have good intentions, but he's not a member of the Curia. If he was a member of the Curia, it would have been done. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, let me say this to you. You're a member of the Curia. We want, after we've killed it, I'm talking about them. All right? The order. Any one of the orders. Thule Society, Jesuits, etc. Any of the subdivisions. Right? We've killed the economy in certain areas of Wilmington. Now we're going to gentrify it and rebuild it. Right? You're highly skilled as a mixologist or making peanut butter sandwiches, Philly steaks. I mean, good at it. Yesterday. You're a Roman Curia. Today, all right, so you're an envoy. You don't talk to me directly. I'll talk to you. You're, say, Chase Manhattan. We infuse 75 billion. She gets 2 billion. Your job is to go buy this section of Wilmington and get the people out. And there's a plan that's already in place. You didn't work for any of this because it's only toilet paper. Yet it's 2 billion. To these people, this is more than their lives. When you come amongst them, if you drop a stack of hundreds, well, shit. To you, you're only picking it up because you have to keep in their mind the perception of its value. But if they weren't around, because you already know, no different than the Romans know that the fiat that they give to the masses for value comes from the trees that they stole from the Aboriginal people and printed this stuff with the ink that they stole from the people's berries and told them it was money. And it runs 24/7 to buy the world. And then to sell people back their own resources and make them work for it and make them think they're getting wealthy. Meanwhile, the bottom mission, they came to steal our gold and our silver, and they carried it out quite well. And the politics is to keep you from paying attention to that simple, elementary, child comprehensible fact. Because once they convinced you that this was the money, it was over.
That's right.
It wasn't then, and it isn't now. Point, fact. So the average person, when they hear about 75 billion being pumped into the bank system, it is because the world's no longer buying UST bonds and they have to fund the system. Also, their license was revoked months back. They're not even supposed to be doing this anymore, but because the corruption is so deep, they're continuing to do it. This is another issue with the battle that they're dealing with against Donald Trump, whose job is to help fix this thing. And again, like I said, I'm not defending Donald Trump, I'm just telling you the politics. You can take it as you will. What if you think that it's not going to affect you? I suggest that you don't hold your breath. If you decide to hold your breath, call the mortician first. And make your preps. Because that's what's up. Now the deal of it is, back to some other conversations that we were having earlier, Dr. Naila.
Yes.
We're talking airship. And what some people call hubris. Well, they got some testicles to be talking like that. If you understand trust law and airship, you know daggone well they're not going to honor any of the bonds that they have. They're not going to honor anything related remotely to due process, because they're feudalists and they're imposters. To do other than that would be to dismantle their own system. But they have to maintain the art of pretending to be the republic, meaning they have to wear the masks in spite of it all. And as the people wake up, the mask becomes obvious. They're at the mask, like you take the Photoshop, like here, this is in the yearbook, that thing, right? Well, now they got the panoramic cameras and stuff, and it's taking your whole form, and they notice the stick you got here with the mask. That's, damn, wait a minute. They looking at 3 dimensions and stuff. There's a mask thing out there with that stick, and it's holding the mask up and stuff, and hey, and then you got the 3D glasses on that thing. This is what's really happening. It's just that the people are still groggy, and but they're getting pain, real pain. They're not going to be allowed to ignore this anymore. Are we clear? Problem is some of them got guns. A lot of them got guns. Like really. And this is what's worrying them. So they're arguing about Trump, but they're really targeting the people. So the people are saying, yeah, they're going to get Trump and that legal fetcher and everything, and stuff like that, when actually they're the criminals. They're doing projection, right? Because they know that this middle class, when, you know how it is, they're so used to poor people being shafted by the bankers, they didn't think it was going to happen to them. They didn't think they were going to be thrown under the bus. Because they've been beneficiaries of the corruption for so many generations, they got comfortable and didn't think they were going to get sold out. However, they also still have guns. And they're not into oodles and noodles. You know, I love the oodles and noodles. I can do the oodles and noodle thing. You know, this is hors d'oeuvre type stuff, you know. Cayenne pepper and stuff, and some fresh onions and green peppers and chunky, you know. I'm rolling, you know. But I suggest that the guy that's used to that Ferrari, second car in the garage and the second house in the Poconos and stuff, when they come and Susie can't go to college, and they're pretending that everything's well, and Wells Fargo's coming after the main estate, that they're not going to sit around and march and pray and talk about, let's go call Al Sharpton and march and shit. No, they're not. They really aren't. They're going to look for them oligarchs called congressmen and senators who are really doing this, and we're doing it all the time. And they knew it, but they hid it from the public. That's where the worry is. If you look at that, you'll understand why all of them people are just loosely referred to as Democrats, which is kind of improper. That's what's really going on. This is the hatred of Donald Trump. But if Donald Trump doesn't fix this, none of the trade deals that he's trying to make are going to work. And the whole thing is going down. But meanwhile, while he's trying to fix it, a lot of industries are going to collapse, and they're going to make them collapse. And I'm suggesting to you right now that some persons who claim to be union leader guys, who are members of the Roman Curia, told these people to go on strike, knowing that'll give it a look of what's getting ready to happen. Don't be surprised if General Motors operators declare bankruptcy. But they're not going to be bailed out this time, if they do. Second largest employer, besides U.S. Corporation Army operations. So you consider how that's going to reverberate through the communities. And if they don't declare bankruptcy, they're going to collapse any damn way. So what they're going to have to do is sell off to survive. Are we clear? Even though they generated a measly 12 or 13 billion last year, right? Sound like big fiat to me and you, right? Right? And to the union workers, right? Meanwhile, the Jesuits are pumping 75 billion that they'll admit to in the banking system every day. Every day. And they've been doing it for months, until the day before yesterday that they admitted to publicly. So that means these corporations who survive are going to take the finance and buy back their own stock, which on the long run is going to kill their companies anyway. It's going to kill their companies anyway. And then the people who got all these stock right now got dead paper. Why? Because the 75 billion a day made the value of their stock below zero. Below zero. Which means all pristine stock, they're dumping it right now as we're talking. Forget what the public ain't being told yet. I'm telling you now. But it's also other people that's in other organizations that are talking trash about us right now, that are afraid, which is why they're attacking us. Because many of the Moors have been claiming their estates, and it's messing up the system because the bonds are based on us since the Civil War. No one's talking about that. Why? Because that's the ball of wax. You get the point? And people who don't understand this look at current events as having nothing to do with the history. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, people who don't comprehend this are not thinking in their mind that the United States Corporation crashed in 1912 and 13, and that was the motu proprio that the Pope talked about, and why he had all leaders come around and meet, and they promised not to do no more doctrine of discovery. And of course, to save themselves, they continued it, and the rest of the world knows it. So the rest of the world says, all right, we'll stop feeding the harlot. And this is what's going on. It's really what's going on. This is where the 75 billion a day really comes in. Are we clear? So remember, the printing press is running 24/7 and a half. And they can't keep up with it even at that rate. So what makes you or anyone think that while they're doing that, that this will retain any value in trade? Well, I got a lot of this under my mattress and stuff. You know, I got the firm mattress. Why is your mattress firm? Don't feel like you got springs in it. I don't. I got stacks. Well, you may as well unzip it and throw it in the fireplace because it's getting cold, because ain't nobody going to take it. Now, and that's an exaggeration, but it's really true. It's really true. But I do comprehend that the average person who really doesn't understand the economy operations, I didn't say economy operations, because of training, they still don't get it. Even if you show it to them, they still don't get it. The only thing that has stopped this thing from collapsing has been the military operations of the Jesuits. If it wasn't for their military operations, this thing would have folded in right onto the people 204, 205. You know, but Bush did, you can call it a good job, because he's a front man, understand? So don't blame him. Like all of them are front men. They're simply spokesmen. But they're credited with the administration operations. You understand? No different than Wilmington is the name of the city. Wilmington didn't do shit. You get the point. If you get the point. It's the body of men and women operative behind it who owns the bond system. Problem, they can't float bonds to keep running the cities. The cities, to the people, they're doing this to run their houses. To governments, they're floating bonds for all big projects. Are we clear? They can't do it anymore. Are we clear? So the Jesuits have to pump in 75 billion a day that they admit to. That really isn't the number. Go ahead, interject. Who has the mic? This is very important, because while we're talking and sharing, keep this as a canvas in the back of your head. Because a lot of questions that will come up, you will answer yourselves, but we're just interchanging. Keep that in mind. Go ahead.
It's funny how when you're on the outside and you can see things from a different perspective, you can see things that you miss when you're sometimes on the inside and not privy to, really know what you were doing. So when I was working in that arena, we had annually, I think it was every 3 years or so, the city went for what was called a ban or so. They would do a thing called a ban, which is a bond anticipation note. And so we would get to, the various departments, mine being one of them, would have the opportunity to put down like sort of our wish list of what projects that we were going to do that had to do with housing development or so forth and so on. But they would have to go to the bond market. to get the funds that would, say in 3 years or 5 years it was gonna fund this project. They were called bands, that it was called, bond anticipation notes. But then it got to the point, you mentioned across the street, right? So that was one of my projects. Oh, I was there, we broke ground and da-da-da-da. But somehow, the brook dried up. What was anticipated that was gonna do certain things, they went, and on top of that, you mentioned this. I remember a whole 2 or 3 block, 4 block area that under, when I was in that position, that was acquired, people were moved out. And the promise was that there were gonna be new housing development put there. To this day, it's just blank, empty spaces. And other people are buying up the properties for other reasons. And so it was a serious case of gentrification that, happened within the last 4 years.
Yeah, a lot of times that's done or presented for that to take place.
But I'm saying, see, here I'm on the inside, thinking that the projects are actually going to go forth, and we're doing these great things and all this, and now that I'm out, I'm going, this stuff should have been done if it was going to be done.
Of course. Now, the point of it is, I guarantee you this. Except in small instances, because nothing ever goes always exactly how it's planned, most of what you see was already planned. Meaning that, say for instance, you're paying me, politician, for a permit to build something over here that I know won't fly in the community. No, won't fly. And according to existing regulations, can't be done. But you're paying me to see that it's done, knowing that I'm really a lobbyist for the corporation in the first place. The masses think I'm their representative. They're paying me and you're paying me. You're paying me more. But the game is for me to keep them having faith that your vote counts and all this kind of stuff, right? So what we do, we make them promises and we float some bonds for this project that they are going to pay. They. To them who don't understand government, they think the oligarch government is funding this. No, the people are. So the debt's on them, and they're robbing their estates that they already floated bonds on anyway. That they don't know, they think they got mortgages and deeds and they think they own property. Right? They've already been floated, are we clear? On past bonds. So the value and the cost always goes up, but their actual value goes down and is going to a negative, and it's always that way. So, we fund or float bonds with a promise that looks like it's going to benefit the people in the neighborhood. It falls through. No, it didn't. It was never. Right? So now you are given, say, not that you work for, you're given $1.8 billion to take care of this matter. So it's given to a bank and then it's floated into your account. Right? And then you're sent out to go deal with this area. Right? The real buyer is you. For the project that you knew couldn't float, that you paid me for in the first place. And it's called a feedback loop. And then, so you're getting it so the people don't see it's you. And in the end, the project that could have never been built, never allowed according to the regulations of the people, is now going to come up. And you're in the background, you got stock in it. I also have stock in it. Oh, well, I'm the city councilman, congressman, senator, and you don't know. That's how it always has worked since 1861. It's just that finally, after this whole century and some odd years, for the sake of some people have finally started figuring this thing out. They're still asleep, they started to figure this thing out.
Lord.
They're blocking information, but they're finally figuring this stuff out. And then the middle class who are being thrown on the bus are telling some things. And this is the awakening that you see. And this is also the battle against Donald Trump. Not symbolic, in fact, because Donald Trump represents, to name some, fired military generals and admirals, etc., who were fired, this amongst others, from administrations under Bill Clinton, under George Bush, under Barack H. Obama, and going back even to after the CIA assassinated Kennedy for trying to bring back Article 3 courts and Article 1 money under the Constitution for the Republic. That's the real reason they murdered John Kennedy. And those people who wanted to restore the government to its Republican form, being so small in numbers, that's how deep the corruption is, are really some of the people who are behind Donald Trump. I'm just telling you what's really going on. Take it as you will. This is the battle. And they're dismantling the operations of the democratic operations, which is really the feudal order in England operating here, even though Donald Trump is a made man. It's a conflict of interest and a conflict of truth and history, but it's really what's going on. Now that they've threatened him and his family, he almost has no choice. He started down a path that now he has to operate sincerely, whether he intended to or not. Because either way, they intend to destroy him and his family. So, even though it's a made man battle game that they started out with, it's coming to a real chess match, for real. So when you're looking at Donald Trump, you're not looking at Donald Trump. You're looking at military men and others who've been meeting secretly since they assassinated John F. Kennedy to start unraveling this thing. So if they got Donald Trump out of office, it wouldn't matter. It still will continue. Are we clear?
Question.
Go ahead.
Given everything that's happening, the abrogation of the gold, the private commercial paper having no power except in the connotative minds.
And the abrogation of Article 3.
And the abrogation of Article
That no one talks about. I repeat, let's back up again. When you say this from here on in, and when you do your radio shows or anything, remember a lot, and this is not dismissing because you're right on time.
Okay.
So much emphasis has been put on Wilson and the abrogation of the gold clause, and none on Article 3, when actually that was a political necessity to neutralize when people figured out the abrogation of Article 1, Section 10, because the remedy would be in Article 3.
And you're talking about the organic constitution, Article 3, Section
It's
2.
exactly correct.
Diversity of nationality.
Which is
diversity
why-
of citizenship, proper venue, consular court.
Yes, which is why agents among us were given cues in recent days to attack us for enforcing Constitution law, and for some of the heirs putting liens on the corporate operators who were supposed to cease and desist all operations already. Keep these things in mind for those listening and for yourselves, secondary studies in relationship to what we're talking about now. 1960, decolonization of all colonized governments or nation states was to begin in earnest. It had been breached. Are we clear? The United States Corporation is number one on the list as a colonial government. Why does no one talk about the Special Committee of 24 and decolonization? Why is it never on the tongues of people who keep talking about nationhood in any format, or the right of the sovereign right divine of humans on the planet, and they get offended rather than support it? What is their real motive? Why all of a sudden they come up with all these slander attacks? It is because the bond system is effectively dying and they can't ignore us. Of course they have ignored us. But the deal of it is they have also offered different systems of claims against the estate, like authenticate the birth certificate and do a financial statement, a UCC1 financial statement and a UCC9, and know the difference between private and public, and go after the straw man. These were offers made to divert what they knew was happening in the background. Are we clear?
Clear. Let me finish my question.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, given all of that, the issue with the Constitution, the organic Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, diversity, nationality, versus citizenship, property.
Say it slowly so that people can hear you. You're speaking fastly. You're not on an auction block.
We do a lot of teaching here. I got a privilege of having a good friend teach, and so when we present to the people, we don't want to say just Article 3. We say organic Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, diversity of nationality, diversity of citizenship, proper venue, consular court. So whatever you say, don't just go handle consular court. You bring that whole thing, because it's the diversity of nationality, diversity of citizenship. Those are the key pieces that we need to be jumping up and down and screaming. Our remedy for so much is right there.
Because it concerns with a lot of claims that are existing on records in the municipal systems, local, in state systems, and in subdivisional agencies of federal government. And most of the claims are invalid, but they have been accepted as valid for decades. What is the point that I'm presenting in relationship to what you just said, Brother Mustafa, and what has a lot of people upset with anyone who's talking constitutions and saying, they're going to get you in trouble, they're going to get you killed. What they're doing is admitting to what they know that they too have been a part of, even against their own people, that they themselves have been party to assassinations of people in communities, leaders of women and men who have been standing on constitutional principles. The very people in their own organizations and communities have actually been paying or getting backdoor payments to create confusion and division. Hold on. And they don't want to be found out either, so they have stake in the game. Nevertheless, all of them have publicly claimed to support the Constitution. They even take public oaths to support the Constitution. And in secret, they've been supporting the feudal law operations of the democracy, in contradistinction to that Constitution. Problem is, the people are finally, not all of them, enough of them have finally figured it out. And now they're speaking up. Problem is, say decades ago, a handful of people knew it, and they would just murder them and get them out of the way. Other problem is, and this is with some other people who were put in power to make law and to enforce law, who were put in that position, who have breached their obligations, have discovered that some people have been out here teaching people civics and constitutional principles, and these people who they have considered minions and believers and common folk are evolving on a level of civic scholarship that has been held back from them from these leader guys who have been presented as their leaders in organized organizations that's supposed to be enforcing the Constitution. And they've been doing exactly the opposite. Now they themselves are forced to publicly attack people who've been supporting that Constitution as if they're the enemies of the Constitution, as if they're the enemies of truth, as if they're liars. However, they're going to be sacrificed too. So some of them are going to be forced to start telling the truth. This is really what's happening on this planet, not just here. Because remember, this is worldwide. Except for a few nation states, all of them are under the Roman Curia operations. But it's still being dismantled. This is what the 70, I'm making connections. Are we clear, Tamara?
Yes.
That's what the 75 billion that they admit to a day is really all about. Is that no one's buying the bonds, so they have to buy them and put them in warehouses in New Jersey. The same warehouses near where they put the greenbacks that Kennedy had printed up that they've been hiding from the public.
Yeah.
Oh, they're putting in them warehouses. I repeat. So the same warehouses that the greenbacks for the United States under the Constitution that John F. Kennedy had printed up that got him murdered in warehouses in New Jersey. That's one of them. They're buying up the bonds and stacking them in warehouses. Also, they were doing them in the last few years in Belgium, for those of you who know how to do research. How long do you think that's going to go on? Meanwhile, the shipping containers that have been shipped to shore, to the shelves of these malls, beautiful malls all over that they call the U.S., they're going to have all these beautiful glass staircases that's going to be shining, but no one walking up them. Beautiful malls. How long do you think that can go on before the middle class figures out that they're being sacrificed to?
The picture is extremely gloomy. So as I want to close with this question.
Go ahead.
It's a question of future and salvation. With everything going the way that it's going, how?
Inevitable.
How? That's right. Does remedy for the devastated people take place if the goal?
Isn't that called the judicial system?
Yes.
Now, that's why they neutralized Article 3 courts, because they knew it was coming.
But if the, quote, gold is abrogated, and if the
then they come in and
private
steal our
commercial
gold and silver?
paper is nothing.
Let's back up the connection. Spanish Inquisition, mission, steal the gold and the silver, although other precious metals, and do land grabs and land claims. Under unum sanctum operations and the doctrine of discovery that's been operative even up to these days, and the public forgot until the Pope of Rome happened to mention it, calling leaders of the earth together and religious leaders together and promising to end the doctrine of discovery with the motu proprio. Is that not on record?
That is on record.
Also, the doctrine of discovery never ended, did it?
They breached.
Neither did the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors.
Correct.
And North America is not India. Is that correct?
It's Morocco.
Central America is not India. Is that correct?
It's Morocco.
South America is not India. Is that correct?
Correct.
The people are not Indians. Is that correct?
Correct.
India is a fraud, isn't it?
Islam.
Even the place they call India next to China in Asia is not India. That's Sindh. Also known around a little bit over 2,000 years ago by the Mauryan dynasty as Hindustan.
That's it.
Oh.
Islam.
So there's no such thing as Indians, is it?
None.
It's another fraud, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it has worked quite well for a while, hasn't it?
Islam.
All right, so now you got all these bond systems that have been sold to the nations of the earth, and their treasuries are loaded with U.S. Treasury bonds that are no good, and they will never be redeemed. Meanwhile, they've been systematically murdering people off around the world, knowing that these bonds have come due. So they are keeping wars going on to kill the real creditors. Because the U.S. corporation hasn't had a treasury officially since 1922. So they've been operating off of the gold of other nation states and robbing them of their resources with their private commercial paper that have no backing whatsoever. Because it's toilet paper that they've been printing 24/7. And in order to save their system, they've been pumping, as of late, over $75 billion, but the $75 billion a day is what they will admit to because they were caught. Not by any lawful operators here at North America, by other nation states who have been calling them out on it. And they haven't been able to block all of the sites on the internet. They blocked most of them. But that much information got through. Are we clear? So in spite of the people being unaware of what's going on, that doesn't stop the world from being aware, and the world is not buying it anymore. So the deal of it is, all of the offers to capture the straw man are irrelevant, because the straw man is dying in the box. Get the point with the Wizard of Oz? Where the house falls from the ether, the houses. In my father's house, there are many mansions.
That's right.
The ethereal world, the house falls down to a wicked witch, and her stockings curl up. And Dorothy discovered, oh, yeah, there's Gucci ruby snippers there. And she starts doing the moonwalk and stuff. And she was a little confused, and they say, look, Doc, you just bumped your head. You're home. Because she followed the yellow brick road.
It's not.
Gold standard. You see the point? So people are upset because some of the heirs of the estate have said publicly, we're on the gold standard. She got a nerve. She can't say that. Yes, she can. She's an heir. Well, just because you're looking at the Fofers and the trustees who've been in breach for decades and claiming to be the sovereigns who never were the sovereigns, and they're not Americans either. Just because the people got used to that doesn't make it true, does it? That's not opinion, that's fact.
Islam.
Wizard of Oz, the curtain is pulled. Go ahead.
Just a couple questions, I'm seeing some things that are popping up. One question or one comment. One question was, and it goes along with just what you were saying, is that 666 trillion a real objective for our people?
Use your common sense. It's more than that.
Yeah.
That's only a signal to counter 666. For every claim that the demon platform has made, there's a counterclaim. That's what that symbolizes. And even that is more than they can pay back, because what they got ain't theirs. And it already exists in the global estate trust controlled by Rome and the Jesuit order. Meaning that what they have claimed is not their own. Just because they've been running it, still don't make it their own. Just because North America, Central America, South America, and the islands have been colonized does not make it the property of Rome under unum sanctum. answer your own question.
Another question or comment, well, the question was, what's up with our consular courts? Why are they not functioning for us? And then someone said, you are the court, brother. And then
There you go.
And then they said, yes, but
Third person.
yeah, but I guess we have a consular court and they're supposed to be running, then they should be running. Especially they tell us to send in removals and to aid the people.
Now, what they're referencing, now notice the third person projection. Dr. Naila.
Yes.
Notice the third person projection.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing in the consular court for us? Right?
Yeah, that was the question.
Now, number one, the person who said that is obligated to have been doing the same thing himself or herself. And they're looking to others who had the guts to stand up and take the position of the obligation that already existed on everybody concerned. And they're looking for a sacrificial lamb. Well, you ain't getting none. That day is over. You ain't getting no more Jesuses for you to lynch and for you to sell out to Rome. So clean that question up for starters. And prepare yourself to take your places among the affairs of men and take responsibility. Because every man and every woman and every child must confess their own. And you're one of them, and you must confess your own. So stop looking at this thing from a third person perspective. Furthermore, have that person who asked that question contributed any funding to support the consular court on their behalf? But they have certainly supported the feudalists, and they're still paying taxes for them to counter you.
Well, it looks like they said thank you for clarity.
Oh, yeah.
Because
See,
so
like
much
this.
is being, with that coming up, we in the last couple of days have been a little rocky, and a lot of things have been put out there, and I'm glad some things have been, made.
Let's put it this way. Let's back up. Let me make this comment.
Yeah. Please do.
When we talked the other day, the first thing that came to my mind, because I was busy, was when myself and Grand Sheik Nature, Bey, was suing the operators and the owners of the corporation in Neptune, New Jersey, and in Asbury Park. You know what they used in the federal court to try to counter our suit?
Diversity.
12b-6, diversity of nationality. And then some people claiming to be Jews wrote an article about me calling Taj Tarik Bey the Fourth World War. So when this operative, who claimed to be a Grand Sheik, who works for the CIA, who's looking for a power position in the Moorish Science Temple of America, was given the nod, he was aided in making a video and tying anyone connected to me as liars and terrorists and anti-government sovereign citizen guys of Moorish liar guys stuff. But I already knew, if you notice that I didn't get alarmed when you told me.
Right.
Matter of fact, one of their agents came to this building.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
The same agent called me and wanted to
One
come
of
back
their
here.
agents came to this building
Yes.
and complimented me on what I was doing, and also showed papers in relationship to the Moorish movement, i.e. the Moorish Science Temple of America, proving the infiltration and the sellout, but because he's seeking power for himself, he wouldn't publish it, although I told him to, because the papers belong to the people.
It's fine.
And he's one of their agents that made up that video. It didn't surprise me. However, as you already know, I had already chosen this subject before even that he came up.
That's true.
I see them coming, and I saw them coming. The deal of it is, we don't need titles from them. The people around the world support us. The people sanction us. And like I said before, and I'll say again tonight, officially on the record, they can call us liars, but they can't prove us liars.
Islam.
Are we clear? Whenever we make references to anything to the people, we always give them points of reference. They're counting on the established fact that most people are not studied. One.
That's right.
They're counting on the established norm that most people don't know that law, i.e. jurisprudence, and history are tied together and are to be taught together in erudition systems to humans. But instead, they are forced to go to educational systems of the Rockefeller, which is, and are training centers for animals. So they are well educated, but they're not erudite. When people come among us, they get erudite. Now, that's a difference. That's called human learning systems. So those persons who work for the CIA, that some of them wear feathers too.
All right.
Yes.
That's right.
Are kind of upset because this is what occurs. And it's not, I'm not doing this, so don't get that confused. You know, I'm not patting me on the back. When you help people to have courage to respect themselves and to actually start opening books and studying again, in spite of Index Librorum Expiritorum, and in spite of Index Librorum Prohibitorum, that they begin to rewire themselves. And nature also assists them. Problem that the leader guys have is that they become irrelevant. And so now they're angry. That's what's happening. But I ain't mad at them. The door's open for them too, because the work we're doing is for them and their families also, whether they appreciate it or not. Because it has nothing to do with ego. Their ego may be on the table. Mine's not. I don't come with the ego on the table. I'm just Taji guy with the cheap sneaks. And don't need a title. And I don't need their authorization. My mother authorized me, so let's get that out of the way. Any other questions? And that's like true. Yes, she's gonna need the mic. Take back, she's gonna need it.
Questions?
All right, what popped up?
I think you're supposed to address this.
So keep in mind, and this is back to a lot of times when we're talking with Stockton. And because you know, like when we talk, we do what we do.
Right.
And what has some of these people upset is that most of the people that come to the House of Reawakening Minds are scholars in their own right. And to try to discredit them, they'll say, well, they're Tajiites, they're following Taj. No, they're not. They're intelligent people dealing with other intelligent people, sharing information for the good of humanity.
Islam.
And that becomes a burden for people who've been BSing these people for generations and had their hands in these people's pockets. And we're making them irrelevant. Not because we're not targeting them, we're just doing what we can to help the people. But understand, a being that becomes erudite in fundamental things leaves the degrees of what is called believership, which is for donkeys, imbeciles, and people who are not willing or ready to handle reality, and are constantly sucking on false matrices while fussing, complaining, and marching all over the place. And when they start getting knowledge, they start removing the straws from their necks. So therefore, club members who are mad at people who are not part of their clubs that they made up contrary to principle are upset. And that's why those videos are popping up. Are we clear? Go ahead. It's called COINTELPRO operations. Counterintelligence operations set up by J. Edgar Hoover and targeting Aboriginal people with the help of other Aboriginal people who are known as conversos. There you go.
Can you address, I think you may have said something about it earlier, but because it is becoming, it absolutely is an issue with some people, the issue of your birthright, and where that comes from, where the bloodline comes from. Because
yes.
I think what has happened that some people, like you said it earlier, there are people that look like Moors, but when you trace their bloodline, are not Moors, but based on their mother's bloodline. And then and vice versa. There are some that don't look like Moors, but based on their mother's bloodline, they are. And the people have gotten really caught up in their feelings.
And it must be cleaned up because the world's economies are collapsing. You see, these are issues that have been buried.
Right.
Remember, in order to steal people's birthrights, they created what is known as nom de guerre systems, as what is called substitutes for identification.
All right.
Are we clear? So it was necessary for them to alter anthropology and geography, as well as politics and pedigree bloodlines. Therefore, this is why in contemporary times, humans are referred to as colors and not by their pedigree and their bloodline. It was done to support the unum sanctum operations of birthright theft. Are we clear? So they had to muddy the mother. They had to murder the mothers off. Now, all murders are not necessarily physical. Are we clear? All human existence is traced through the female, not through the male. But it is promoted as patriarchy, meaning that the politics is promoted as patriarchy. The reality is nations are matriarchies. Fact, nation comes from nativity. Nativity and nationality comes from nation, i.e., or nativity, which means natio, to be born, to come into existence. In life, not in politics. In biology, not in politics. In genetics, not in politics. Womb man is the gate for all physical existence in the human form. Are we clear? In other words, even if they do a test tube thing, you got to have a womb. Now, males, which I'm one of those guys, the wiener guys type thing. 5 minutes, that's a good one. Trying to make an impression, we'll work an hour out, 2 hours type thing. Hope you're impressed. Woman carries it 9 months. Who do you think does the work? Who do you think takes the phosphates, the salts, the potassium, the magnesium, the zinc, the gold, the other elements of the earth, and formulates soul of man's temple, known as Solomon's temple, which is this body, which is called muscles, tissues, electrical system, hair, bone structure, also known as musclemen, also known as Muslim, which has nothing to do with a belief system whatsoever, has to do with a fetus, a body, constructed in the great womb of the matrix of woman, who is the grand architect. So all nations are matriarchies and are structured accordingly. Therefore, all wealth, starting with the womb, then the breast, then the earth, are called inheritances. And the culture is called heritage. It didn't say heritage. That doesn't take anything from the sons. But don't get confused with the fact that we're set out or given these bodies to build with. Now, I'm a man. I already know what I can do as far as taking physical things and making them beautiful. But I do it because my mother made me. And when I made it, I did it for my sisters or some woman, etc., because I'm impressed. But if she wasn't there, believe me, sofa and some popcorn and a soda pop, and I'm cool. That's real. Hold on. But when it comes to really getting stuff together, if a woman ain't confused by this BS that she's learned in this fake dead culture, she's the one that makes things beautiful. And she's the one that why we as men try to make things beautiful. Other than that, we don't even care. Give me a stick shift with this patches on the bottom of this truck, all bent up, and I'm impressed because it's going, listen to this engine. Wow, 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 wow. Yeah, and I'm impressed. Woman come around now, you want to get a $2,000 paint job and shine it up and stuff out there, and you're out there shine. You don't care about that thing. You don't even care because she's around. That's how this thing works. Let's get it right. Nations, that's what nation is. Truthfully, are we clear?
Yeah.
All right, so get over it. Now, I want to make this other deal, because it's back to answering this question.
Well, add this in. The person asks, so when they test the father, what part are they testing to identify the father in blood?
They're looking at DNA. They're looking at X and Y chromosomes. They're looking at dominance. They're called recessive gene, dominant genes. And truth of the matter, while they're doing that, and what they do in most public displays is usually a lie. In other words, they'll have double records. Because they're always looking at the mother. They just don't admit it. If they're doing any anthropological study of human development, they're always going to be looking at the female while talking shit. And talking about, see, because really...
Even in terms of paternity?
Wait, paternity is a process of the building of these bodies in the womb. And father is derived from pater, which is derived from paternity, which isn't gender, it's process. So every male comes from a female egg. Get over yourself and stop the BS. You know, let's stop. Let's just, why do we need to continue to keep wasting energy on bull when the people know in their heart what the truth is? Because what they're trying to preserve is the patriarchal system of Rome that's destroying this planet, because they don't want to admit that every man got a belly button and came from a mother. And no mother came from Adam's damn rib. Get over it. Adam got a belly button. You better look above that grape leaf. Swing him around like this by the wiener and throw him over there in the corner.
I'm going to read this because...
No, we're that foolish.
No, I'm gonna
This
read,
bull
it's
has got
another
the
comment,
end.
I'm
Go ahead.
gonna read it, it's gonna set you off, but I'm reading it in there. It says, so many African tribes and nations trace themselves through the male line. I'm not arguing for it.
That's public.
But it needs to be addressed directly, including Emperor Haile Selassie and his grandfathers Menelik II and Johannes IV. It seems like he's not naming information that would strengthen his argument. I don't know if you mean
That's
he meaning
public.
you
Let's
or
look at
he
this.
meaning them.
Let's look at this. Let's look at this honestly. Most of what's presented in the world, even concerning the African nations, is a contradiction because most of the people who are presenting that information are puppets of England under the patriarchy of the operations of the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors. That's not unknown. Fact of the matter is, all African and Asiatic nations can be traced back to matriarchies. That's a fact. Now, fact again. Whether they're studying the animal kingdom and the human kingdom, they can talk all the politics they want to try to justify the corruption that exists today under the patriarchal system. And I guarantee you that any and every scientist from any nation state on the planet Gaia that they call Earth, which Earth is just a term that means inhabited place. It's not the name of the planet. Will trace all life form through the woman. And they can lie all day long and try to figure out how to dance around this all day long. And what I don't do is play with them. And you show me any male of anything, they got these buttons. See that button right there? That sucker don't feed nothing. But it's there. Is it not?
Yeah.
I don't wear no bra. But if you think you want to get fed, you better get some vitamins because you're going to starve. Get over it. Nature doesn't lie. Why do people keep lying? To defend positions that nature doesn't support. And then think they're going to continue to get away with this. We need to stop wasting energy on lies that we've adopted and cultivated to our own injury. Any scientist around the world can tell you anything publicly to get paid, to get funded. And in secret, all their notes trace life forms through the female. They want to study roaches and how to kill them. They want to study the female. They want to study animal life on farms and talk about cultivation and stuff. Yeah, they might do a little bit of genetic stuff on the bull to give them a couple more muscles, but it's only because they want them to stimulate more eggs. That's all he's doing is stimulating, like a little electrical charge. You understand? Well, she got all the eggs on both sides. Every woman got enough eggs in her fallopian tube to create a nation. That's why the Pope claimed the eggs with the marriage certificate, that they, like the preachers, lie to the people and say it's a contract between them and God in heaven, knowing that it's a bond claimed by the Pope of Rome. And they are a part of it too. Damn suckers. Parasites.
And married
Preachers, politicians, pastors are all parasites and partners and pretending they're separate.
and tie you to the state of.
And always complaining about Taji guy and calling me a liar. I say nature supports what I'm saying, and I'll stand on that. And I will never apologize for telling the truth.
You don't have to.
So don't expect it.
We don't expect it.
And I can't be bought. Thank you very not much.
Okay, I don't know what this is a different subject matter, but ask Taj about setting off debt.
Setting off debt. This is what setting off debt is. when the Skull and Bones member, known as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in 1933, in an action that's noted in congressional records, reestablished another shell corporation of the United States corporation that went bankrupt again. Now that one that went bankrupt was the one that Woodrow Wilson set up in 1913. So keep that in mind. Now, for those of you who are listening and those who asked that question, go look up United States Code of Law 95, subsection A and B. And because the United States Corporation Company is a corporation established for human trafficking and is not a country, they needed funding again, so they needed some humans to sell. So the Pope had already claimed the birth certificates and the wombs of the women, and they've been selling these bonds around the world already, and they went bankrupt again. So they needed some more humans to sell. So they used birth certificates.
You said 12, US Code 95 or 95?
United States Code of Law,
95,
subsection 95 A and B. And what it deals with is essentially this. Whenever they make a law, which is really not law, which is really what they call public policy, distinguished from constitutional law, this is human trafficking. So it will always come under public policy and public law. You'll hear those two terms. Get familiar. They have to put remedy. Are we clear? But they never explain remedy. Are we clear? Mm-hmm. Therefore, since they sold the people again, right? It's called House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th of 1933. And they pledged all the birth certificates for the hatched eggs from the women of the eggs that they didn't kill in the wars and stuff to back the United States corporation shell, the new one's debt. Rule. All the debts of the United States issued against the bonds leaned against the birth certificates of the people shall be the debt obligations of the United States. All transfers that are made in the name of payments are not really payments, but they are coupons that can be redeemed against the United States, but shall be sent out to the people as bills when there is no debt, for they are liens against the existing sister QV trusts that are attached to the Global Estate Trust set up by Rome. And all debts are already paid by the United States. So when they send you a bill, they're double dipping. And number two, that no bills or debts can be paid with private commercial paper. Therefore, on all instrumentalities of the books, which they have 2 or more ledgers at all times, of the United States, shall be set off and discharged, but not paid. That's what discharge is. Discharge is a set-off, which means it's put off into the future, but it's not paid. It doesn't disappear. It's set off. So these two terms, write that down, discharge and set off. Yeah. So anything that is done with this instrument under the Jesuit order of the United States Corporation, subdivision, colony, owned then and owned now by England, which is occupying Northwest Territories, factually known as Morocco, Al-Marak, America, by the Jesuit order, any transfers of any fiat categorized credits or paper is discharged. Always and never paid. And the obligation is to the United States, not to the people. This is why they get mad when the people discover this and try to discharge themselves, because they've been held to wardship. And the local municipal operators always want to be your trustee so that they can rob you. That's why they discharge and will attack you if you try to discharge, while they're obligated to the fact that it's a discharge. Which means they're belligerent trustees and fofers, aren't they?
That's right. That's right.
Now you understand why those who really understand the system start putting liens on them. Because that's the only way you can hit them. Because they do not respect the law. They're actually breakers of the law. Are we clear?
Clear.
So 95 subsection A and B.
Did you have a 12 on there? Because some people, you didn't say it. Right?
Yes, I put it in the flash drive that you...
No, is it 12 then 95 or just?
Yes.
What?
Yes, 12, yes.
USC 12?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Subsection 95.
No, it's 12.
Subsection.
It's 12 USC 95A.
Yes.
Okay.
Taj,
Yes, go ahead.
Black's Law, I'm in the 5th edition. I'm on page 416, discharge.
Go ahead, you all. Listen to this carefully. That's not yelling.
Discharge, to release, liberate, annul, unburden, disencumber, dismiss, to extinguish an obligation, to terminate employment of a person, release as from prison, confinement, or military service. Discharge is a generic term. Its principal species are rescission, release, accord, and satisfaction, performance, judgment, compensation, bankruptcy, merger. Discharge, to release, liberate, annul, unburden, disencumber, dismiss, to extinguish an obligation. Discharge.
So now, once you begin to study, and once you understand the issue of the lost estate, quote unquote, that Noble Drawley talked about, and when he talked about the operations of colonial operations, he said the Europeans are living off your virtues. And he said, children, you have no idea you're just rich. What is he talking about? He's talking about that. And he says, if you doubt that the program that I had the prophet have, in relationship to my people and the citizens, go to those who know law. Did he not say that? And what are these people who keep saying that they're grand sheiks in the Moorish Science Temple, keep saying Drawley didn't teach law, Drawley didn't teach civics? Well, yet the Moorish Temple of Science was registered as a civic organization. They're lying on him, so you can understand why they're attacking us.
Still in Black's Law, Taj.
Go ahead.
Again, page 116, this is the 5th edition. Still on discharge. As applied to demands, claims, rights of action, encumbrance, etc. To discharge the debt or claim is to extinguish it, to annul its obligatory force, to satisfy it. And here also the term is generic. Thus, a debt, a mortgage, a legacy may be discharged by payment or performance, or by an act short of that, lawful in itself, which the creditor accepts as sufficient. Governs discharge of commercial instruments. To discharge a person is to liberate him from the binding force of an obligation, a debt, or claim.
So now, what do you comprehend from that when you understand just that little conversation? That the average person, even given this information, a lot of them, unless they've been studying, it still goes over their heads. And it is this: the so-called national debt is a fraud and doesn't exist. That's why they don't want you to nationalize.
It doesn't exist to the living, breathing, sentient
It doesn't
being.
exist. It belongs to the United States Corporation Company of England and
Islam.
not to you.
Islam.
They're claiming to be the legitimate government and then trying to put it on you when actually they're de facto and a fraud. And the debt is theirs that they've been converting on you all the time.
People gonna be
It's
upset.
discharged already.
That's right.
Double dip, triple dip.
Now, Dr. Naila,
Here it goes.
I talk to you. We have a lot of conversations, outside of this venue. And you get into subject matter that some people would call deep. Right? But it's common to you. You know, and I know, in a lot of our conversations, we can get into a lot of subject matter that would be absolutely interesting to these people. What good would it do when their foundation isn't there? What, is to pump ego that I can get on multiple subject matters and sound interesting? I'm not interested in sound interesting. I'm interested in solution. I'm interested in resolution.
There you go.
I'm interested in remedy.
There you go.
I'm interested in uplifting fallen humanity. I'm not
Islam.
interested in ego. I'm not interested in titles. I'm not interested in collecting a lot of fiat. You already know what I'm able to do, skill-wise, anyway.
Right.
The time that I'm doing here, that I spend here and doing other things, I could use my skills and go generate a lot of this stuff and live quite comfortably.
Absolutely.
But I would not be happy. What I do is not just for the people, it's for my own therapy. To some degree, it's selfish, and I admit it. Do you understand? Because I wouldn't be happy. I like peace, and I like happiness. This doesn't make me happy. So therefore, I can't be bought. So the only thing they can do is attack me, call me a liar, and wish they could get one of their grand sheep wearing a turban and fez, Negroite guys who was a COI agent to call me a liar on video, who can't prove that I'm a liar. But they're counting on the fact that the people aren't awake. However, I don't have to do anything. I'm not bad. Because the people are going to come choke him when they find out that he's an agent for the CIA. Once they have the knowledge, I don't want to tell them anything. Because it's their birthright, not mine. It's their birthright. It just has to dawn on them that it's their birthright. See, as long as they think it's your stuff, my stuff, your stuff, you guys stuff, ain't my stuff. It's their stuff. It hasn't, some people it hasn't dawned on them what birthright really is yet. You wait till it dawns on them. That's why Jwali said when Jwali was on the scene, he said, if I told you everything, you'd go back to sleep. The half has not been told. He said, if I told these Moors everything, they'd tear something up. That's why they're mad, because Taji guys telling them some of the other half that they've been cheated out of by some of these grand sheiks and sheikesses and grand moderators and grand governors who were put in power to make law and then turn around and lie to the people and say, Jwali didn't make law and they don't deal with this constitution stuff that Taji guys talking about.
I just say this. Timothy Boyd, yes, this is live, but we cannot get to every question or comment that you put there. This is live. Did you get that? Thank you.
But we're trying.
It's all right. We can't get every question, every comment. It's one
Yeah,
word that
but
wants to know if this is live.
we're
This is
trying.
live.
And this is
We
why
just can't get to everyone.
concept, if we get concept across,
Yeah.
we've answered your question.
Yeah, listen.
If you understand see, this is really what it is. And I want to explain this to everyone, because I understand the frustration. Because people are asking questions, and they're legitimate questions. And even the criticisms are legitimate.
Absolutely.
They're coming from what they know. But they're also coming from what they do not know. Our position is to do what we can do to share with people information that we know is systematically held back from them, so that they can make better decisions, and not to destroy institutions. The institutions are being destroyed because they're frauds. Not because we're exposing them, it's because they're frauds. And as people grow up and stop being believers and start being knowers, it is they who are tearing down the institutions, not Taji Guy.
And you know what I've noticed, Grand Sheik?
Yes, go ahead.
Even some of the questions and the comments that are put there are those on the live feed that will respond, and their response is valid. So it's really no need for me to even us to bring that question to you, because I see where it's been answered by someone else.
Because they know.
They just they maybe they just want to hear their name read or their question read, but somebody's responding, and that's what you want. You're not making followers of Taj Tarik Bey, and I don't know how much more
we
takes to
do
stress that point.
not promote that. We are against followership.
Absolutely.
That's what got you in trouble. It is. We're for liberating.
Islam.
We're for presenting fundamental principles to people where we can come together and build things for humanity, not compete
Islam.
and argue. That's what's wrong. Are we clear? Back to other principles which we're talking, me and the brother was talking earlier. Because some people run into this problem.
Yeah.
One of the experiences or lessons, life lessons that you yourself knew of but demonstrated a few weeks back. So I don't have to tell you, you experienced it. Now it's yours.
Yeah.
2-3 years ago, I could tell you these things and you could look at it and be interested, not believe it.
Right.
But it's different when you walk the walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So get out of the boat, Peter.
There you go.
Walk the water.
Talk about a tribunal.
Now it becomes your own.
Yeah.
Now, irregardless of what takes place with others or what others say,
Right.
you understand better, even though you already knew jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But the administrative clerk
Yeah.
told you, I have no jurisdiction.
I have no jurisdiction.
Do they publish that?
No.
You damn right they ain't. Do them club members, Grand Sheiks, who've been making these videos tell the people that? No, they'll say, Taji Guy got Mustafa in trouble.
What no trouble? We got remedy.
No, what we've been doing is trying to get people out of trouble.
Islam.
And people come to us in trouble because they haven't been helping them.
Islam.
And their job was to help the people. And they've actually betrayed the people.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they spend their time attacking us instead of Rome.
Right.
They accept a stranger before their own blood.
25.
In violation of their own law. So we already know they're frauds.
Yeah.
But the deal is the people are starting to learn that they're frauds. And they're mad. They think we're attacking them. We're not attacking them. We're just teaching the people the truth. And the people are seeing them for what they really are. That's all. They're saying,
the truth will withstand.
yeah, they've been collecting for 70 years of bus fund. I ain't seen a bus yet. Maybe Taj, you guys saying something there. They've been collecting funds for 100 years for building the roof. It's still leaking. Maybe Taji guy is just telling the truth, maybe. How about that? Please. These people are full of it. Give it a mic. I want you on the mic because I don't want none of it missed.
I just thought about what I was gonna say.
Spoke before an hour ago.
First thing to go.
Islam.
Islam.
And just having a general conversation with the Moor, he said one of the things that he's having trouble with is you would see the forerunners, you would say are the Moors that are not in the temple, will say they're upholding fallen humanity and they're upholding the mission of Prophet Noble Ali. However, when they go to visit the temple, inside the temple they would say, well, the Moors are not upholding the bylaws and constitution of what the prophets say. I think he said 4, 5, and 6 of the bylaws, which states that Moors must be part and partial with this said government.
It said part and parcel of this said government and must live the life accordingly.
Okay, hold your wisdom for a second. I'm just having a conversation.
Go ahead.
It must be part and parcel. He said partial, so I'm just going to
Go what he said.
Conversation. He stated that the bylaw states one must be part and partial of this said government and to not overthrow this said government.
Being Moorish American,
okay,
you are part and parcel of this said government and must live the life accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Now you must identify this said government.
That was my conversation. That was my response back. Let's look at the time period of which the bylaws were created. Let's look at that aspect. So let's
prior to 1933.
That's what I said. Let's take all this. I said, let's look at the establishment of the Moorish Science Temple, of that time period, the Canaanite Temple, the Moorish Science Temple in 1913. I said, let's look at
Canaanite Temple, Moorish Temple of Science, then Moorish Science Temple of America.
I'm giving you a conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm giving you a conversation. Okay, so let's look at the time period of the bylaws. So you're making a statement in today's current government system does not fit in a time period of which the bylaws was created.
Therefore,
so you see a conflict, but the conflict comes into where the prophet said uphold the main thing stands the same with the foundation to uphold the Constitution. So it's not saying negate the bylaws because the bylaws was before the overthrow.
Very simple. This is very simple.
So let's get into that
Let's get into
close
that. This
out.
is very simple.
Mm-hmm.
You know how we always told people from the round table for years, one of the first things that we do as a protocol is send them to the temples so that they can see for themselves, not what we say, that they can experience for themselves the contradiction between the people who are running them temples, and then when we send them to the microfilm to read Noble Drali's statements, including the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, and that's plural, not singular. The Moorish leaders' message to America, in particular, religious controversy, all of these are established documents set forth by Noble Drali, including the letter that he commanded to be read before every meeting a few months before they assassinated him, that they don't read. So when you give to answer the question that, or the conversation, and even surrounding questions that will arise around it, I'll just take some excerpts from the prophet's divine warning from the prophet for the nations. Doesn't he say, he says, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States
Islam.
of America. He's talking about the Republic. He also says, and since that Constitution has declared every man free and equal, and since that Constitution has never changed, right? So he's telling you what the missionary work is, and he's saying the Constitution has never changed, which it has not. Then he said, the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you go back to sleep. So as soon as you begin to study, he says, one of the charges he put on the people, he says, study. And when you would have studied well, and would ask me what to study next, I would reply, study yourselves. And as soon as you begin to study that Constitution, you find about the breach and why they murdered Lincoln. Then you find about the secret oligarchy set up by the congressmen and the senators, and the real missionary work on why they murdered Lincoln. Then you discover that the republic was overthrown, and they pretended to change the Constitution by changing for into of.
That's it.
And actually made it a private document and denied the people the use of it to defend their birthright. And set up a democracy order of feudal law contrary to that Constitution. And now you get a concept of why Noble Drew Ali approached the Queen of England, commanding her to respect the treaties and the Constitution. And he founded the old Canaanite temple. Canaan, Palestine, Canaan, Palestine, the bankers. Oh, then in 1913, he set up the old Canaanite temple. Immediately, Woodrow Wilson, 1913, met with the Jesuit order on Jekyll Island and sold the United States Corporation because it crashed. Then they converted all allodial titles and all aboriginal titles to mortgages and deeds, 1913. Do you think that's circumstantial? Do you think these grand governors and grand chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple will dare tell the Moorish American members that history? They won't touch it. They will tell them that Taji guy is telling lies and is going to get you killed by Rome. Because they're in partnership with Rome. And their position is threatened. Taji guy is talking too much. And he won't take the payoff. So they're upset with Taji guy and people around me. So they attack people around me to try to break up any unity or strength that's there because it's threatening all of them. Are we clear?
Clear.
Not only that, he said, help me in my great missionary work enforcing that Constitution. And them same grand chiefs have been getting away with years telling the people that Drew Ali didn't teach civics. Not only that, you go to the microfilm in Chicago, because I went to the library, in Chicago, because I get around. Yeah. And it said part and parcel, which means land, doesn't mean attitude. Part and partial means attitude. Part and parcel means land, a section of land, L-A-N-D. How did that all of a sudden change when they got rid of Noble Drew Ali? And then no one wants to talk about it. Did they have a constitutional convention? I'm not aware of it. That's just one little thing. Also in the Moorish leaders' message to America, it states, in fact, and you don't research it yourself, because that's all the microfilm. Moorish Holy Temple of Science was registered as a civic organization.
Still says that.
I repeat, I know a lot of people, I'm so glad them grand chiefs can't throw sneaks through the mic. Because they're throwing sneaks right now, the old stinky ones too. I'd be up here going like this.
Tomatoes.
They really want me dead. I already know they do. However, I'm not afraid of them. Anyway, he said, and this is on record, the Moorish Temple of Science was registered as a civic organization. 1925, 1926. Right in time when the United States had to what? Establish another shell in 1925, which is why I shared those papers with you all. Do you know how many Grand Chiefs got mad when I started sharing that information in Chicago and with other people? Yes, I see the brother, he's going into the literature. Well, he got skates on, he got Teflon skates on and stuff, right?
Come on,
We're doing a moonwalk and stuff.
Run out of time. Here we go. We're in Moorish literature, Moorish.
Oh, can you come up here, please?
Oh, come on, Doc.
Can we go look at that like for a minute,
Yeah, you
please?
want here?
No.
Come on,
Look right there in the camera.
okay, here we go.
That's like that. Go ahead.
Uh,
Identify the little. Take the cover and go in front of the camera and then pull it. No, go get. Because they pretend they don't see this stuff. No.
On the record, for the record,
Let me help you out.
let the record show and reflect.
Let me help you out.
Yeah.
It's called this.
Oh, there it is. Oh.
Then you got that other camera.
Then it's called this.
We got two cameras.
Then it's called this.
Turn down the ground.
Then it's called this.
Back it up a little bit.
And like this.
Up like that.
And like that.
Not that far. Yeah. Break.
And like this.
Oh, whatever.
Wait, I'll give you a minute enough so y'all can pull it up on your screens.
Oh, God.
The point is, what he's showing you is something
Now,
that comes
and
from
he's going to read
the
it.
Moorish
All
Science
right,
Temple
now
of
you read
America.
it. Now go ahead.
Okay.
Excuse me very much. And this should answer a lot of
Moorish
questions.
literature. This is the Moorish Science Temple of America, Incorporated. Prophet Noble Drew Ali, founder. And I'm on page, and this is what they pass out, and they give out that you can acquire in the temple.
Remember, Taj, you guys didn't make this up. He
Page
called me a
18.
liar for saying this.
Taj sent me to the temple a few years back. So, and this is what they gave me. Moorish leaders, historical message to America. I'm not going to read it all the time.
So that's not to the temple, that's to America, isn't it? So that's universal, isn't it?
Moorish leaders, historical message. Moorish leaders, historical message to America. I'm going to go a couple paragraphs, all right?
Do you? No, you read it.
In connection with the aims and objects, rules, regulations of the Moorish Science Temple of America, I deem it proper to submit to you a brief statement of our organization, covering its inception, rise, and progress, and of the Mohammedan religion, which I hope will be satisfactory to you and be the means of causing you at all times to adhere to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice in your relation to mankind in general. I further, most anxiously, hope this brief statement will help you to more clearly see the duty and wisdom of, at all times, upholding those fundamental principles which are desired for our civilization, for our civilization of our posterity, such as obedience to law, respect and loyalty to government, tolerance and unity. We organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization.
Back up and read that part again.
We organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year of 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization.
Back up and read that again.
We organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year of 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization under the laws of the state of Illinois. Now,
Excuse me.
they don't allow civics.
Not only you go in some of them temples and even say the word civics.
And it's a problem.
And somebody with a turban and fez on is pulling a rope out of the drawer. They had a rope in the drawer, understand? and looking for a pole to lynch you, calling you enemy to the prophet, saying that you're lying, saying that you're a Tajiite, made that stuff up, that you're going to get people in trouble and you're going to get people killed, when it's really them that they're talking about that's been killing people, including some of them who really murdered the prophet.
And this book comes from
That's
the
the
temple.
truth.
I got this from the temple. I yield, God.
Oh, you don't have to yield, but just appreciate it. I love your modesty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.
The deal of it is, when you begin to examine what the prophet said and what he really established for us in activity, including the Rotarian nature of the movement, which is universal, and the harmonies promoted among all mankind, they will say things that are absolutely opposite of that and condemn me as a liar for telling that to the people, saying I'm creating confusion. Well, I say I don't apologize. And I'm going to apologize so you guys don't look for an apology from me, because you ain't getting it. And I ain't your club member, and I don't care how disaffected you are. And you can take your little titles and your little ribbons and go float in the nearest leech-infested pond where you probably belong with it. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Tamara, I think that answers a lot of questions. Not me, the prophet's words.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, they can take it as they will. You know, but what they're not going to do is call Taji guy a liar and get away with it, and then say that they're supporting Nobudrali, because they're not supporting Nobudrali, they're liars. But they know that most people don't read and don't see that, or they don't pay attention, or they read past it without paying attention to what's being said. You know, like people start repeating things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Damn, he can count. How much is 2 and 2? 2 and 2 is 4. How much is 4 and 4? 4 and 4 is 8. How much is 100 and 100? And they start getting confused. Same rule applied. What's up with y'all? You get the whole point? Well, if you got 3 numbers instead of 2, man, that's not fair. No, the same rule. If you can count, the numbers don't matter. The principle doesn't change. All of a sudden, grand governors of the Moorish Science Temple keep telling people, they don't teach no civics and shit here, that Tajite stuff. This is a religious organization. They're lying and always have been liars.
Divine and natural.
Now, when you look on the back of the questionnaire, which says our authority, and then you go to the microfilm in Chicago and look at the microfilm, it says, the Moorish Temple of Science adopted, write the word adopt, what that means, as its corporate name, the Moorish Science Temple of America. So did the Moorish Temple of Science disappear? It did not. It adopted the Moorish Science Temple of America as its corporate name. Get that mic and come back up here. You ain't getting away with this.
I must state for the record that what I'm about to bring is what the temple gave me, Todd.
He's going to state for the record he got Teflon sneaks on.
Where you want me to go?
I want you to read it. Yo, you come over here. The camera.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, like, I'm going to move this chair over.
No, you good. Come on, Todd.
Right.
Our authority, copy, book 521, page 579, State of Illinois.
Slow down, because they'll pretend that they didn't hear what you were reading.
Page 579, State of Illinois, Cook County. Then it says SS, which is synopsis series. Number 101.
Which means subsection in law.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
1015905, and that's a decision ruling, Taj.
Oh, yeah.
Corporation, religions, affidavit
So it's a religious affidavit, isn't it?
of organization.
Thank you so much.
Form number 1099. State of Illinois, County of Cook. SS 1928, August 1st, what is that? At 2:52 p.m.
So give me your time. It's 1928, right?
Yeah,
Is
1928.
that 1913?
1928.
Is that 1913?
1928. And
Is that 1913?
no,
Oh, why did you say
1928.
so?
No,
Well, go
no.
ahead. I'll go read it.
And recorded in book 521, page 579. I, Noble Drew Ali, recorder. The recorder is Salons Jaskanowicz, Moorish Science Temple of America, held at Chicago in the county of Cook.
The microfilm said Moors Temple of Science held at County of Cook a meeting and adopted as its corporate name the Moorish Science Temple of America. And they altered that document too, conveniently. But go ahead and read it out anyway.
Okay, I got the correct version. You want me?
No.
Held at Chicago in the county of Cook and state of Illinois on the 20th day of July, AD 1928. For that purpose, the following persons were appointed sheiks, according to the rules and usage of such: Moorish Science Temple of America, you got something to say? Do solemnly swear at the meeting of the members of the Noble Drew Ali, Merely Eel, Small Bay, Lovett Bay, and Foreman Bay, the Moorish Science Temple of America, deriving its power and authority from the great Quran of Muhammad to propagate the faith and extend the learning and truth of the great prophet of Ali in America, to appoint and consecrate missionaries of the prophet, and to establish the faith of Muhammad in America. And said Moorish Science Temple of America adopted as its corporate name the following: Moorish Science Temple of America.
It's already obvious that's an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
They're saying Sears adopted the corporate name Sears. Wait. Sears had a meeting to adopt a corporate name Sears. Wait. Sears had a meeting to adopt another name, and the other name is Sears. Wait a minute. Lay's Potato Chips had a meeting to change their name to Lay's Potato Chips. You didn't need that meeting. You get the point. Now the microfilm says, Moorish Temple of Science. They had a meeting, and the Moorish Temple of Science adopted as its corporate name the Moorish Science Temple of America.
That's right. No, we have that correct version. Let me 20 seconds. I had the privilege of getting, this is what they pass out in the vast majority of all the temples, what I'm reading. And of course we can acquire.
Except the one in Newark, New Jersey, where he founded the temple, and also the one in Asbury Park, and the one in Canyonland.
Right.
They will pass out the original material, which would be contradictory.
So we were able to grab, through Taj, I'm going to tell all the solar returns you had.
Have fun.
He had in his possession, that was very helpful to us, a very, very old 101. And it's clear that infiltration has obviously taken place. And the books have, somebody has come in with unclean hands and a horrid soul, and it's presenting fraudulent or modified, do we want to, is that a good one? Modified information of truth.
Slightly altered.
Altered information of truth. And presenting it as truth, and that's a huge problem.
Took a few zeros
the
off
vast
the bill.
majority of the Moorish Science Temples, if you're in the temple and you're getting this information, it is not the de jure. How's that for your word today?
So now we're talking de facto and de jure, again, aren't we? And as we talked about earlier, because me and Dr. Naila was having a conversation, and because we, whenever I get a chance, we talk, and as any of you who already know, she's very humble and modest about a lot of things, but you already know that she can get deep.
Islam.
But that's just the nature of her. You know what I mean? And then plus she has a poetic mind. So you already know she thinks multifaceted. She thinks on multifaceted levels. And so when we usually get in a conversation, we always have to end it without ever finishing it.
Like tonight.
Yeah. Truthfully. And so a lot of times that's why I always try to prime her to get involved. Because a lot of times she'll back off and everything. But the real deal is, she has so much to offer to people analysis-wise and analysis-wise. And I encourage her to do that because it'd be very helpful. And because she's modest in so many areas, she said, well, I'm not so grounded in that. Yes, she is, but I am, and you go ahead and do that because I'm not. Yes, she is. So I'll ask her and I'll, just put her on the spot and just say, well, go ahead and jump in and do this. Because I already know when she does, she'll let them little jewels out. That's why a lot of times I tell her, keep the mic. I think we got to get 3 mics out here. 2
I got the
and
mic
up.
closure now.
But go ahead. I know we're over time, but go ahead.
I was like, yeah, this is.
But go ahead. Say what you think. Now this is the point, and this is relative to some of the questions that are on the board that people don't get a chance to answer, or to ask, or to be answered.
I think we pretty much.
The deal of it is, as we always say, and we will say again, if the people read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations,
Islam.
and the historic message to America, that will answer so many questions for anybody, any researcher anywhere on the planet that says, like, what's that Moorish movement is all about? And one thing that any honest researcher will come to the conclusion, undoubtedly, is that he's telling you that where you are now, you will not be later. That you're brought in on an introductory level. And that they don't stay stuck here. And he also told the Moors this, and keep this in mind, and this is also what has a lot of these COINTELPRO operatives upset with us. And they will never tell the people this. Noble Drew Ali says, the nations of the world and the nations of the earth have your history. He said the Moorish Divine National Movement has a Rotarian complexion. So write that down, Rotarian. Write that down, Rotarian. And do the research. And then compare that to people telling you that you can't be a Moor, which is your bloodline and your pedigree, if you don't come to their particular temple. That they themselves help compromise. Which is also why they won't read that letter that we published in the Moroccan Star in 201. And also why a lot of them grand governors are mad at Taji guys for publishing that letter, making people aware of its existence that they've been hiding. Now, for those of you who don't know, I got that letter from 2 people. From Assistant Grand Sheik Neil Bey, Elijah, who was Assistant Grand Sheik at number 10, Moorish Science Temple on Liberty Street in Camden. And the other was Grand Sheik Hamid Eel, who was the last Grand Sheik to walk with the Prophet Noble Drew Ali in the flesh and maintain the integrity of the Moorish Temple of Science, Holy Temple of Science in Newark, New Jersey, where Noble Drew Ali founded the old Canaanite temple and maintained the integrity of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. And that's a fact. And he's the one who gave me his own Quran and gave me also the bylaws off the wall in a frame, which I have today on my wall. And the first time he met me, he said, because I know you're going to do something with it. I never met the man before and I've never seen him after. And that's what I've been sharing with you all. Come on up here, brother.
All right, this is the letter to be proclaimed in every meeting. This was instruction given by Noble Drew Ali.
Before you read that letter, can I present this question to the listeners and to questions that come up on your board that we don't get a chance to offer. I always send the people to the temple, and some of these Grand Sheiks and Sheikas of the Moorish Science Temple have accused Taji Guy of stealing temple members or telling them not to go to the temple, and that's the first place I send them. That's for them to have their experience, to see what's against them so that they can protect the prophet and the movement. Because I know when they're awakened, they will clean them temples up. Just like the prophet said, they're going to start coming in with their eyes wide open. They just didn't think anybody would be out here opening these people's eyes. Now, this is the letter that the prophet himself commanded to be read before every meeting. And I guarantee you, for these people who've been looking at these videos set up by the COINTELPRO operatives with turbans and fezzes on, particularly in recent days, ask them when you go to them temples why they don't read this letter. Now read the letter clearly, slowly, completely. Date and time.
Moorish Science Temple of America, Home Office, 3603 Indiana Avenue, Noble Drew Ali, founder, Chicago, Illinois, January 18th, 1929. To be proclaimed in every meeting. Dear brother, Islam, I'm glad to know that I have few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim it was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as an American citizen, they are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they themselves may take charge of the situation. I've notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that contribute to the movement and the uplifting funds, the one that pay their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That is why I'm calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance, and I need it bad. Never before have I needed finance as badly as I do at present, that I may shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nation of the world will not recognize the movement without me, the prophet, being the head. It has been proven by my work in which I have performed in the last few months, because I was at the governor's inauguration to present the Moorish Divine and National Movement, and I will be at the inauguration of President Hoover for the same cause. Noble Drew Ali.
So you can see that he represented the Moorish Divine and National Movement. He wasn't talking about the temples, because the temples were neutralized. You get the point? That's the sellout. That's why they won't read it. And he makes the connection to the Moorish Divine and National Movement to the world, not some club. And you're supposed to be doing what? Meeting with the heads of government. Because it's your estate, it's your birthright that they've been misguiding. What happens if you don't speak up? Is it not called tacit acquiescence? Didn't he say take your places among the affairs of men? So why are they upset with Light Tajiri? Why are they upset with Sharon? Why are they upset with me? Why? Because we took those facts to the people, and some of the people are starting to activate them, and they think they don't have the right to speak up for their own birthright, since those traitors have not been doing it. After all, they ain't into civics, so they ain't got no business arguing about civics anyway. Do they?
None.
They supposed to be in some corner praying. Because they're only a religious organization, so why are they complaining about what we're doing in the civic arena? All of a sudden now they're interested in civics but not admitting it?
We read that the purpose for founding it was for civics.
Of course it was. It's called government. It's called social duties and responsibilities. Now, anyway, thank you all for coming out to the House of Reawakening Minds. Thank you, Dr. Nail, for being patient, as you are and have been. Thank you, Tamara, for doing the camera work and the background productions and all that stuff, because very often the people in the background never get much credit. You know what I mean? Thank you, Mustafa, for interjecting, carrying your law book.
It's not.
Because we don't have to bring it from over there and whatever.
We want to thank you for being here. We also want to make the announcement that on next Friday there will be no class here at the House of Reawakening Minds. It's the third Friday. We're going to be out of town. Both Sister Tamara, we want to wish her a happy solar return in advance. And we hope you again, so we will be traveling. But on the fourth Friday, then Grand Sheik will be back here. Grand Sheik. So normally it is the first and third, but for this month only, it's the second and the fourth. There is no third Friday class. And we will do Impress Us. We'll get Impress Us in there if we have to do it on a Wednesday or a Thursday, but we're going to do give over our fourth Friday to our Grand Sheik so that we make sure that we can hear from him.
And what we can do, take the questions that go unanswered and pick the prime ones that haven't been answered in the context, and we'll build around it. Because we really need to fix some things. Because the truth of the matter is that the people are going to fix their own problems.
Absolutely.
We just got to try to encourage them to trust themselves. And just share with them some fundamental information so that they can stop doubting themselves and stop looking for leaders. This is not the age of leader guys. The leader guy era ended in Pisces.
That's right.
You're now entering fifth dimension with Aquarian lights. Get used to it. You will be required to confess your own. And with that, I yield the floor. Have a grand evening.
Thank you so much. And we thank you those who have asked for our Cash App and our PayPal. We didn't post PayPal, but thank you for your support. We do always need your continued support to make sure we continue to bring this venue to you. And again, thank you to Sister Tamara, who is my right arm, left arm, and the hammer. Tamara the hammer. Love her to life. And thank her for all the help and work that she does here at the House of Reawakening Minds. Islam.
And you want to take these synonyms and kind of like take the pictures and just study them later, and then do some work, add to that in concept. Because that's the politics that's going on. And that's your charge now in particularly North America, which is the beacon light for the rest of the world that has to be fixed. You're charged with making sure that is in place and that this is removed. Because that's what's been in operation. That's why the people are poor. That's why the land is broke. That's why all the wars around the planet have been happening, these constant wars. All because of the imposters who have been pretending to be de jure, but are actually imposters. Are we clear? Yeah. Now, the birthright theft is based on what can be done in that gray area to the people while looking like they're honest. It's sort of like the wolf in the Little Red Riding Hood type thing. She goes out with a basket of biscuits and stuff like that to her grandma's house. She comes back, her hoodie's all over the side, she's pregnant. One of her keisters is missing, ain't got no biscuits and nothing else. Who did that? Grandma. I thought that was Grandma. And I asked her about her nails, but,
Say goodnight.
And she said she had her dentures done and her nails and stuff.
Say goodnight. Say goodnight. Say goodnight.
It's on.
It's live.